Good morning. Call to order this November 19th, 2019 meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Supervisor Cerna? Frost?
Here.
Natoli?
Here.
Kennedy?
Here.
And you have a quorum. This meeting of the Sacramento County Board of Supervisors is cablecast live on Metro Cable 14, the local government affairs channel, on the Comcast, Consolidated Communications, and AT&T UVerse cable systems. The meeting is closed caption and is webcast at sacmetrocable.tv. Today's meeting will be repeated Friday, November 22nd at 6 p.m. on Channel 14. This meeting is also broadcast live on KUBU Radio on 96.5 FM. A DVD copy is available for checkout from any local library branch. Members of the audience wishing to address the board may fill out a speaker slip and hand it to staff. When the chair calls your name, please come to the podium. Also, please silence your electronic devices at this time.
Thank you. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you everybody for being here this morning. I do have a few announcements to make. First of all, Supervisor Phil Cerna from District 1 will be teleconferencing into today's meeting. That is not a ventriloquist you're hearing. The clerk will make an announcement when Supervisor Cerna joins the meeting, which he has. Please be patient as you may hear a soft ringtone throughout the course of the day. The clerk will take a roll call vote for each agenda item to accurately reflect the votes. And if there is anyone, as it is a public meeting, that does want to be present at Supervisor Cerna's location, they are able to do so. And if they would like to speak on an item, I will ask for the names and I will call at an appropriate time. On another note, you'll notice that the dais is light today. Supervisor Peters will not be joining us today as she has had a family emergency, and the hopes and prayers of the board are with her.
Okay. For your consent matters, items 1 through 37, I do need a motion to continue item number 6. This is the notice of intended public auction of tax defaulted property and resolution authorizing the sale at public auction of tax defaulted property.
Do we have Chair will second. We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Supervisor Cerna? Supervisor Frost? Natoli?
Aye.
Kennedy?
Aye.
And the motion passes with those members present. And those are my notes for consent matters.
Thank you. Are there any others, any members of the board that have any comments or questions? Consent items. There being none, is there a motion?
Did you say 15?
15.
15. Okay. Item 15 is the authority to submit a grant application to the California Health Facilities Financing Authority on behalf of the county executive to apply for the Community Service Infrastructure Grant Program for a centralized jail diversion treatment and resource center.
Supervisor Bruce Wagstaff here. Could you repeat your question here? I couldn't hear your question clearly.
Yes.
Thank you. Right. So, Supervisor, one of the key issues in gearing up for this, should we get the grant, will be to coordinate discussions in the immediate area. We've had some preliminary discussions along those lines because, as you will see in the board letter, there was an earlier application that we submitted, largely for this same purpose that we didn't get from the state. So the probation folks have already initiated those discussions, and that's a key part of our gear up for the project. Right. Will do.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of the board?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Natoli?
Yeah, no question. I just want to, I had talked with NAV yesterday, and on item 9, we have some additions to CIP, and I know I raised the issue regarding conditions of a roof on a county-owned facility, and I know that NAV is having our folks take a look at that. It happens to be within the realm of the Parks Department, but I want to just note that as we approach winter, I know rain will come sooner or later, and we had some things that were pointed out. So I want to just thank NAV, appreciate looking at that, and I trust we'll be able to even do something this winter.
We're looking at it.
Okay, all right, good. Thanks. That's all I had.
Thank you very much. Any others? Okay, I have no cards from the public. Is there anyone in the public? Do we have a motion?
Okay, so this is on the consent calendar, noting that item 6 got continued. I would move the balance of the consent calendar and noting the comments by Supervisor Cerna as well.
We have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Frost. Natoli.
Aye.
Cerna. Cerna.
Supervisor Cerna?
Kennedy.
Aye.
And the motion passes with those it's a unanimous vote with those members present. Okay.
We're 4 minutes ahead.
Yes, we are. Would you like
Appointments?
to do appointment?
Sure.
For your appointments, that's item 33. Supervisor Cerna, we're going to item 33 for your appointments and nominations. Okay. You are continuing to December 10th, the Children's Coalition and Developmental Disabilities Planning and Advisory Council. And for your matters today, we have the Cordova Community Planning Advisory Council. I have the notes for Supervisor Peters to continue that to January 14th. And then Supervisor Frost.
Nominate Kurt Campion.
Okay. And Supervisor Natoli.
I'm sorry, Kurt Haven. I said Campion.
Kurt Campion lives in Gulf.
Wrong Kurt.
It's
I'm awake.
reflected.
I'm okay.
It's reflected in the record.
History.
I was going to say, that's a big community advisory council area.
Supervisor Natoli.
Just take a pass. I was just looking here to, we'll continue for to the second meeting in December.
Okay.
Thanks.
So that's December 17th.
Yes.
Okay. First 5 Sacramento Commission, Supervisor Kennedy.
Close the nomination and continue the remaining items to December 10th.
Okay. Sacramento County Alcohol and Drug Advisory Board, Mr. Kennedy.
Chiefs recommend nominating Bilgit Batar.
Okay. Sacramento County Mental Health Board, Supervisor Cerna. Okay, and Supervisor Natoli.
Continue mine till December 17th, please.
Okay. And then last but not least, Sacramento Housing and Redevelopment Commission, Supervisor Natoli,
December 10th, please. Continue.
to December 10th.
Yes.
Okay. That concludes your nominations.
Okay, well, we have 2 minutes.
Now you have 2 minutes.
Guess things go faster when there's fewer people at the dais. Okay. Well done on the consent calendar this week there, Mr. Gill.
Pretty quiet in here.
Yeah. Okay. Item number 28.
Item number 28, approve an appropriation adjustment request increasing appropriations for operations of the Gibson Ranch in the amount of $362,250. Also, there's a salary resolution amendment adding one senior park maintenance worker, one park maintenance worker 2, and one park maintenance worker 1, and one recreation specialist.
Good morning, Chair Kennedy, members of the board. Liz Bellis, Director of Regional Parks. I have one little overhead item for right now. Get that. So this is for everyone who's a visual person like me. I wanted to talk to you about Gibson Ranch Regional Parks operation. And I'm really excited about this item because Gibson Ranch Regional Park is really, I envision this as the hub of our north area of the Dry Creek Parkway. As you can see from the map above, it is very near our Cherry Island Golf Course, our Cherry Island Sports Park, the northern portion of the Dry Creek Parkway, and then our Dry Creek Ranch House. And I envision this could be a facility much like we have Discovery Park on the American River Parkway, where we can grow and expand the activities at this park and really serve our north area. For some background, the operation of Gibson Ranch, it has been operated under a lease agreement with GRP 2011 LC since 2011. This agreement was amended in 2017, and that transferred some of the financial responsibility of utilities, well maintenance, and park maintenance to the county, and paid GRP up to $50,000 per year for capital and deferred maintenance projects. On February 2nd, 2019, GRP provided a notice to the county that they would be terminating their lease agreement effective June 30th, 2019. We had some subsequent negotiation discussions, and GRP continued this notice until November 30th, 2019, allowing us to work on a transition plan and to bring this operations plan forward to the board. The department considered different operation models for the operation of Gibson Ranch, and we have concluded the best approach would be a model utilizing both county staff and contract resources. I'm very excited about some potential new partnerships out at Gibson Ranch. We have been in contact with the Rio Linda, Alberta Recreation and Park District. They would like to partner with us to bring youth fishing, summer camps, overnight family camping programs, and utilization of the soccer field out at Gibson Ranch. I've been in touch with the Rio Linda High School FFA to bring back small animal boarding and other programs. I've spoken with the president of the Rio Linda Alberta Historical Society, who is quite successful in growing some giant pumpkins this year. In fact, he entered those into the Elk Grove Giant Pumpkin Festival contest. And so we are going to look at growing some of those out at Gibson Ranch for the community to enjoy. H&K Farms used to have an organic farming operation out at Gibson Ranch, and they are interested in coming back and then possibly also bringing back a farmer's market to Gibson Ranch. And then I've been in touch with Team Rubicon to help us perhaps put together some volunteer group activities to clear the equestrian hiking trails at the park, and then also some fire fuel reduction projects. Our staff recommendation today is the approval of a salary resolution amendment 2020-067B, which would add the following positions to our department: 1 FTE, senior park maintenance worker, 1 park maintenance worker 2, a park maintenance worker 1, and a recreation specialist. This is the staffing level that we have determined would be necessary for the operation of Gibson Ranch. It is also requesting the approval of appropriations adjustment request 2020-2016, which would increase appropriations by $362,250, of which $67,500 would be an increase to our general fund allocation. This does require a 4/5 vote. And that is the summary of my presentation. Any questions?
Are there any questions of the board? Sure. Yes, Mr. Editor. Okay, Mr. Cerna.
So we are basing our revenue projections on past park attendance, both from when we operated the park prior to 2011 and the financial reports that were provided to us by GRP 2011. And of course, with the addition of these new partnerships and programs, we do hope to increase the attendance of Gibson Ranch, but our financial analysis included attendance at a status quo level. It would probably take us a good year of knowing if we would have increased attendance levels. And that would be reflected in future budgets.
Mr. Natoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's, certainly important we have this discussion this morning. Obviously, Liz brings a recommendation. I'm supportive of the recommendation, but I think that there's a footnote that needs to be made here as it relates to what happened, 10 years ago when we were certainly in the community, but our state and nation was in the depths of a recession, and we were faced with obviously very difficult decisions and closed several county facilities, not just in the area of parks and recreation, but as well as in health and in juvenile detention and so forth. But I guess the point here is, and it kind of piggybacks a little bit on the question Supervisor Cerna had, is that this is a different time, but we know that county budgets can run hot and cold, and it got really, really cold back in the late part of the last decade. And what I would hope, and I guess I want to put it out there because I think it's important, and this kind of goes to the question I referenced earlier on the consent item. And I know that Mr. Gale certainly has heard from this board member, and I think he and Brett Ferguson are looking at the CIP for parks. But one of the things beyond closure is that Gibson Ranch facilities had fallen into some disrepair. Again, that wasn't because necessarily the Parks Department management at the time didn't take seriously keeping the facility up. Under the lease agreement that we had, that obviously is expired now, and we're going back into a mode where county is going to maintain and oversee the facility in large part with some contractual operations. I think it's imperative because one of the things that's not included in the staff report is what improvements have been made under the lease arrangement over the last 10 years. But I know in the letter that was attached to the board packet, there were things that the contractor, Mr. Ossie, had talked about relative to the roadways, for example. And it wasn't just in Gibson Ranch Park. I know that in Elk Grove Park, we had similar conditions, and in some of the areas leading into the American River Parkway. My point of talking about all this is that, and I recognize this is obviously not in District 5, but that one, I would hope we never, this board, either in the near future or in the extended future, whatever, have to confront closure of county park facilities. But also, I guess I don't see here a plan that says, what's the baseline we're starting from here, hopefully with some improvements that have been made. I trust there have been because, again, we've seen the budgets over the years, both county parks as a partner and our contractor. But this doesn't talk to that, and I know that's a very expansive park. We've tried to build the use. There are people here in the audience here today who want to talk to either support this item or talk about maybe the next item. But it had fallen into serious disrepair. I'm gonna say that. That's my view. In fact, there had been closure of certain facilities within the park itself prior to the full closure. I think the partnerships that you speak of, Liz, are important, and we have strengthened those certainly over the years with some of the partners in the community. And I guess what's missing here for me, though, it goes not only to what the annualized amount is for providing for county staffing that will provide some level of maintenance and oversight, but what's the capital budget going forward relative to facilities? Because we know that the gate doesn't cover all the costs. It just doesn't. It may someday, I think, with the growth of population in that area of the county, and I think some of the attractions that have been added, but will continue to be built upon as a part of that park facility. And it's an important asset. And again, I think it was pretty awful that we had to close it. I was one of those that voted at the time to close it, but I also supported going forward with the contract that reopened it, and certainly, and here we are today, basically taking it back. So I guess my point is, and maybe Liz, you can speak to this or somebody else can, what's the overall picture here? Because again, we were strained for money to even keep it open and keep the lights on 10 years ago. We've built, I think, some additional support in the community, but that doesn't equate to dollars in all cases. So what is it we plan to do at the Gibson Ranch facility to assure, one, that it doesn't fall to neglect again? It has to, it's going to have to compete, obviously, with other facilities within the park system. But secondly, the revenue projections that, would never get this on the cut list again. I guess that's kind of my concern.
So I can answer that question partially. We are evaluating the Gibson Ranch facility for inclusion in our CIP to make sure that we are capturing all of the projected costs for capital improvements that will be needed at the park, and we'll be bringing that forward when we bring forward our CIP.
I think Supervisor Natoli, as you recall, 10 years ago, at that point, I don't mean this as a critical comment, but in the administration, there was a big push to de-invest from county assets. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the ones that we de-invested from. Hindsight is always 20/20. I don't think, to answer your question, will it ever get back on a cut list? You can never know what the future is, but I think, as far as I'm concerned, if we get into that kind of conversation with Liz, it's not a recommendation that I will make very easily to disinvest from it. I think once you disinvest from parks, it's very hard to bring it back. Mm-hmm. And just like one of the issues we're facing with another park that somebody else wants to take over, I just don't think we can walk away from parks. So it's kind of a long-winded way to tell you that that's not where my interest is. I'm not interested in that. We will try to find every way possible. And again, it's not meant to be critical of what happened in the past, but we are here where we are. Mm-hmm. And I think, as Liz said, we are pretty excited about getting back in there, the relationships that she wants to build, and we want to have a good future out there and want to be more active out there.
Well, and that's good. I mean, I take that. So I wasn't necessarily being critical, but I think history has taught us, some things. And again, and nothing else, certainly budgets are unpredictable. But I think one of the things, even before the approach with the recession of disinvesting, that because there was not a lot of fees generated at the gate, that Gibson Ranch didn't, get a lot of attention. It was a large acreage, and it had, a lot of moving parts to it. And so I guess what I would like to see, and I guess I'm a little surprised that we haven't already done some, not just for inclusion in CIP, Liz, but that we haven't done some analysis. We've sat with a contractor for almost 10 years now with a list of things, and some that we have funded, others that were a part of the overall contract approach. And I guess I'd like to see that. I mean, and I don't think that requires a lot of analysis. And I know we went through this whole exercise in the county, looking at every county asset and identifying some of the needs, and that may be just a little bit dated, but not much. So I guess my question is that not just from a CIP, but if we're going to generate, the programming that goes behind it, we had shade structures out there were in disrepair. We had, buildings that were in disrepair. We had, areas that weren't maintained because we were stretched very thin even going into it. So I guess that's my question.
Yeah, I think surprisingly, we'll absolutely look into all that, but it wasn't at that point in time that the shade structures and other items went into disarray. This actually started in the mid-2000s when there's a decision made. Again, I'm not being critical. I wasn't here. But when you take a department away from generating any revenue to make any kind of money back investment, so if you will, the Cascade died in 2003-04, we got to a point that when the disinvestment discussion happened, we did have facilities that
No, it may have started way before. It might start back in the 90s for all I know. I mean,
that's what I was able to find.
Yeah, that's my point.
I think what we were, as the asset comes back to us, we do have a list. We're going to look at it. The study that you refer, it is 4 to 5 years old. We're going to look at it. But we want to maintain this facility.
Good.
We want to.
And I do too. I want to plan going forward. I kind of know what that is.
And when we bring the budgets back, we'll show you what we have in there, work with our partners out there and see what kind of, what we can do out there. But I think what I'm trying to get at is, again, I'm not trying to be critical. Whatever decisions got made in the 90s and 2000s, there's a reason why they made them. And if anything, we should learn from that. And one lesson I think, at least I've internalized, is you cannot have a facility not have a maintenance budget.
Right.
You can't have a facility not have a capital budget. But then the challenge becomes with all the different competing needs, what do we bring in there? And that's what we work throughout the year with our CIP and operating budget to bring you a recommendation where we need to put money back in.
Yeah, and I would concur with your comments. And again, whether we were critical or not about what decisions were made, that's all history now. But I think I'm just looking for that plan going forward. You bring the item today that basically puts in place the personnel. But I think, the broader look, as you've spoken to, Nav, again, recognizing what's transpired over the course of 20 years or better, maybe 25 years, that this is another day, and I would say, maybe a new day, and I look forward to us making sure that asset, one, is, competes well for keeping up with the maintenance, and let alone any other, physical capital improvement projects that may be a part of that. But certainly the maintenance piece, what you just said, Nav, is critical, and not to have a facility that's starved that becomes an easy target potentially in the future. So anyway, I support the recommendation. Thanks.
Supervisor Frost.
Hi, Liz. I want to thank you for all the thoughtful planning that you put into this. I know that Gibson Ranch is really important to the community, really not just Rio Linda, Alberta, I mean all the surrounding communities. And Mr. Ossie has done an amazing job, and although it'll be hard to replace him for what he was able to accomplish at the cost he was able to accomplish it at, and his sensitivity and involvement in the community, everybody loved Doug, and so it's hard to see transition, but I guess that's the only thing that we can count on. The most consistent thing we can count on is that change is happening. So I am excited, really excited about the way you are partnering the community and all the community assets, which the most important community asset in Rio Linda and Alberta is the people. And so you're taking all these amazing things that they're doing and you're just making Gibson Ranch better. I love your ideas, and I love your vision. And I know that it comes at a cost. I'm obviously gonna support the staff's recommendation. I did have a couple of comments and questions. When we talked about park fees a while back, it was really important to me that Gibson Ranch be treated in the way that all the other parks had been treated as far as park fees. And I think when you said status quo, that's what you meant. It's going to be whatever in our park system, we're going to treat all the parks the same. So we're not going to have one park that charges more than others,
Correct.
hopefully. And that's something that will be important to me moving forward. For me, I want to keep those park fees as low as possible, always. And so that's important to me. I want to ask you about the partnerships. Are those memorialized with contracts, or are those just community partnerships where they raise the money and we help fund it? How do those partnerships work?
So it'll be a mix of community partnerships, and as we move forward with the operation of Gibson and bringing in some of these folks, we could be bringing forward either MOUs or other more formalized types of agreements as we develop these partnerships and develop the programs.
Okay, and I wonder if, did you say they were going to have a community garden at Gibson Ranch for the giant pumpkin? Is this like a community thing, or are you just still developing the vision and not sure how that's going to unfold?
I'm still developing that vision. I would like it to be a community pumpkin patch, but then also have just your typical pumpkin patch that folks can come and buy pumpkins, and kids can have specially, hay rides, etc. So
that's so fun.
Yeah,
That's really
planning for
great.
next year already.
That's great. Okay. Now, it's my understanding that there might have been some park funding in the SB1, and I'm curious to know what your plans are for the swim hole. I know Doug always had the dream of improving that situation and also the RV, are those basically on hold or out, or do you have any vision toward bringing RV hookups to Gibson Ranch? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I do not have a vision to bring, other than the dry RV camping that we previously had approved. But my vision for the swim hole area, and this is probably a little bit longer term, but what I would like to do is to really make that into a children's area with pony parties, and that would be the area where I'd want to have the pumpkin patch so that we could maybe grow something like what is out at Wheatland on a smaller scale. That's my larger vision.
So the swim hole is part of this investment that we're making. We're going to be continuing to work on filling that in, basically.
We will need to get some funding for that, and thankfully there are some funding opportunities coming up with Proposition 68 grant funding, and we actually will be having a CIP workshop at our Recreation and Park Commission meeting this week, where we'll be discussing different projects, discussing which projects we think might be appropriate for grant funding, and that will be at 5:30 p.m. at our Parks office. If anyone wishes to attend, that is a special meeting prior to our regular Recreation and Park Commission meeting.
Okay, well, thank you for your thoughtful preparation, your thoughtful vision for Gibson Ranch, and I support this, and I'm happy to move the item if others don't have any further questions.
I do have public comment this time, but in the meantime, so it's not hanging out there, is there a second to put it on the floor?
I'll second it.
Okay. First is Lucy.
Couldn't hear you. You were not talking into the mic, couldn't hear what you said.
Okay, I've got public comment I'm going to be calling. Okay. Lucy Badenhoop. I had a feeling.
Yeah, didn't want to miss that one.
Yeah.
I'm a member of one of the support organizations for the Rio Linda Society, Rio Linda Alberta Historical Society, as the Sacramento Valley Equestrian Trail Patrol. Our members mostly live in the Rio Linda and Alberta area, and we patrol the park for additional eyes and ears for the park rangers because they can't be everywhere all the time. We have no enforcement authority, but we just phone and report locations and identify problems. So about every year we donate about 2,000 hours of patrol time, which equates to approximately one park ranger's salary. So I just want you to know that's our involvement. So we have a special interest in the Gibson Ranch area. Also, as a property owner in that area, I back up against the Dry Creek Parkway, and that is why I serve as the SVEP representative to the Parkway Committee. So I have a very vested interest in this proposal, and I'm also more of a trail advocate on a national level. I belong to the Pony Express Association, Backcountry Horsemen of America, the Elegant Ears Association, the Mule Association. So I have a bigger picture of what the equestrian community brings to your park system. On a national level, equestrians rank third in numbers of members behind the hikers and the bikers. However, we rank first in dollars brought into the community. So although our numbers are smaller, our dollars have a larger impact. Equestrians spend a lot of money taking care of their animals, both at feed stores, tack stores, veterinarians, and other services, trailers, those kinds of things that come into your community. So I would hope that when you're talking so heavily about gate receipts, for Gibson Ranch, that you would take the blinders off and also look at the wider impact our members have on the community. And keeping an equestrian presence and participation in the park system is essential. I don't know how many of you know, but 10 years or 20 years ago, when I retired from federal civil service, I was looking to retire into an equestrian community. And I looked nationwide where I wanted to go. I found out Sacramento has one of the top 10 equestrian communities nationwide. And that's because of our park system, our trails and access to the Sierra Nevada, and things like
Can you wrap up, Lucy? Can you wrap up?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm just about done.
Thank you.
Other things like the UC Davis Equestrian or Veterinary Hospital, Loomis Basin it's a very wide-ranging impact. Sacramento has a vested interest in the community of equestrians, and I think it would behoove the Board of Supervisors from a financial standpoint to support and maintain that equestrian presence. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucy.
Thank you very much. That is actually, I believe, the only card I have on this item. Is that true? There was one or two I had trouble reading. Okay, so that's the only card on this item. So with that, we will bring it back to the board. And if there's any discussion, Mr. Cerna, I will allow you to go first. Okay, thank you. Any other board members?
No.
Okay. Is there a motion?
We had it. Motion and second.
Motions, that's right. We have a motion and a second on the floor. I appreciate that. Please call the roll.
Okay. Frost. Natoli.
Aye.
Cerna. Kennedy.
Aye.
And that's a unanimous vote with those members present. Okay, item 29, authorize the Director of Regional Parks to execute a concession agreement with Trail Brothers LLC for horse boarding, trail rides, lessons, and training services at Gibson Ranch.
I have an overhead once again, if you would indulge me with that. Before we move on to item 29, I just wanted to let everyone know that we are going to have a Gibson Ranch Community Workday, December 8th, from 9 a.m. to noon. If you wanted to join me and my staff out there, we're going to be doing some volunteer projects out there. Thanks.
Thank you.
And again, for those of us who are visual, this is Gibson Ranch Regional Park. The area that is in brown is the equestrian area. And this next item is regarding a concession agreement. The department released requests for proposals for horse boarding, trail rides, lesson, and training services in September of 2019. We received 2 proposals. The review process was as follows. Proposals were reviewed and scored by an RFP review panel, which consisted of 2 members from the Dry Creek Parkway Advisory Committee, a county regional parks manager, and a member from the American River Parkway Equestrian Patrol. Both respondents were invited to an interview, and that panel consisted of a Recreation and Park Commission member, 2 regional parks managers, and a representative from Project RIDE. Staff, with the assistance of County Council, completed a due diligence background check and also made several visits out to the Gibson Ranch facility to observe the operations. Our recommendation is to authorize the director to enter into a concession agreement with Trail Brothers LLC. The agreement summary is a term of 5 years with 5 one-year extensions for a total possible term of 10 years, a minimum payment of $25,000 in rent annually, or 15% of gross revenues, whichever is greater. 7.5% of revenues shall go towards the operations of Gibson Ranch, and 7.5% towards equestrian facility capital improvements. There is a termination without cause allowed in the agreement with a 90-day notice, or immediately for cause. We have identified the first capital improvement project to be the renovation of the metal barn, with costs split 50-50 between County Regional Parks and Trail Brothers. The three principals of Trail Brothers LLC are Zach Layden, Kalea Bell, and Jill Rusi. I'll go into their experience really quickly. Zach Layden has 13 years equestrian riding experience, 7 years equestrian training experience. He is the vice commander of the local VFW Post 4647 and has a BS degree in biomedical engineering. Kalea Bell, who will be the COO, has 10 years equestrian riding experience, 5 years of equestrian training experience, an AS degree in barn management and animal science, and is PATH certified. That is the Professional Association of Therapeutic Horsemanship International. Jill Rusi has 20 years equestrian riding experience, 25 years experience with the Army Corps of Engineers. She is a certified project manager. She has a BS degree in forestry and natural resource management and an MS degree in parks and recreation. That concludes my presentation. If there are any questions.
Okay, any questions of the board?
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I just wanted to note that we did receive numerous emails and comments that I guess were submitted to the clerk via the public comment site. Most of them in support, but there were some in opposition to this as well. So I just wanted to note that. I think we received that, and they're a matter of the record. We probably hear from folks this morning, but I know that there was a pile waiting for me this morning when I got into my office. So you got it right there.
You're going to
That's
have
probably
an opportunity to.
reflective of another pile of. Good. Thanks.
Mr. Cerna, any questions, comments? Okay. Then we do have quite a bit of public interest in speaking on this item. I think I have 35 cards. So I'm going to ask that you get your point across, because you're welcome. This is your house to come to any public meeting and speak on any item. But if we can minimize the amount of repetition and somehow get that point across under the 2 minutes, that would be much appreciated. But again, the time is yours. First, I will call Timothy Bailey. After Timothy is Renee Knecht.
Hi, my name's Tim Bailey, and I know some of the people involved with this, and I work with veterans outside of here with the VA, and I like the ideology of some of the things they'll be doing to involve with the potential utilization of the PTSD program. I'm very much in favor of what's going on right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Renee Knecht, followed by Richard Kennedy.
Hello.
Morning.
Okay. I'll try to read through this really quick. I had been boarding at Gibson Ranch for almost 2 years. Everything was fine and nothing's perfect, but I was happy out there. My horse was happy. And then we heard that Trail Brothers was coming, and we thought, great, this is going to be super good. We're going to have trail rides and all that. And a week later, things started to fall down. His horses, he brought horses in. He wasn't taking care of them. I have photos. Sorry for my voice. I'm sick. No water. He never has water. Never waters his horses. During the trail rides, he has teenagers taking these horses and their clients on these trails, a 14-year-old and a 15-year-old with no adult supervision. Most of their clients are wearing flip-flops, no helmets, the wrong equipment. When they stage their animals, their horses, they're standing hitched to a hitching post for about 10 hours a day, and I have photos with temperatures of 102 up to 105. The horses the older ones, there's many that are arthritic. They're tied so long, they will just drop and they'll lay there. I've seen it happen twice. These are not experienced horse people that are laughing. This is not funny.
I'm sorry, I'll let you continue, but I realize that when we're talking about an issue like this, there's a lot of passion that runs pretty high, and I get that, and I too am a horse lover and grew up on the back of horses, so I understand, but if we could run this meeting with decorum and respect for those who we agree with and disagree with, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And as the weeks went on, things never changed. But here recently, I moved my horse out because I don't trust Mr. Layden or Mrs. Bell to take care of my horse. They can't take care of their own. There's 4 stalls that are attached to a barn. They're about 10 by 10. I've seen them put 3 horses in there at a time, saddled with all gear, kicking each other, just kicking each other, biting each other because they're in such a confined area. This happens all the time. They're terrible horse owners. They go to these places, they rescue these horses, they bring them in, they're old. Twice. They brought 1 horse in, let it in to a pasture with 7 other horses, and I look over, they're chasing her to death. She was sweaty, her teeth chattering. She had blood all over, and within 3 weeks later, they did it to another horse in another pasture, and I had to help. I went back to get Clea, and we wrangled them, and Zach comes up, and I had to use my belt to catch her. This is how these people are.
Can you wrap up, please?
Oh, yeah. Can I lay any photos right here?
Your time is up. You can hand them out if you like.
Okay, well, the last thing I want to say, can I ask a question really quick?
Go ahead.
How is Zach Layden with the minimal,
You need to wrap up, though.
Well, I just want to know how he is getting this position when he doesn't have the requirements. He's only been riding for 18 months. That's all he knows about horse, 18 months. And then where's he going to get his funding from?
Thank you.
Is that it?
Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you. I am very passionate. I mean, I've been going through a lot these last 3 days, but I appreciate your time.
I'm sure we'll see passion.
And I wish I had more.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Richard Kennedy.
Did you see the pictures, though? She was going to...
Yeah, you can pass those to the board if you like. Yeah, if we could just grab those photos.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm Richard Kennedy. I'm from Plumas County. I have concerns about this application and the process you went through to approve this application to even become before the board. I have documentations from certain people from my territory that was experienced with Zach on trail rides and horse boarding and training, and my belief is 18 months of actual training. I remember when he was just an apprentice hired for the very first time by a friend of mine, lifelong friend. His dad was a lifelong friend of mine, and they've been in the horse business for quite some time. I've been affiliated with most of the major ranchers since 1946 or 47 in Plumas County and Sierra County. And my concerns is the way that this application has been accepted, but the background checks and whatever. And I would request that I have more information that I can get to bring before this board. That I've only had a week. It was brought to my attention. I'm a 50-year-old friend of the prior young lady's family and her uncle and her dad. I was acquainted over this Gibson Ranch. I had a roping arena outside of Alberta and in the early 70s for 4 years, and was affiliated with all the horse people out there. It was appreciated out of Gibson Ranch, and I know it'll be appreciated more, but I think that the application that this man has filed has a lot of falsehoods to it, and I would request before this before this Board of Supervisors make their decision, that there would be further inquiry on this particular brother LLC.
Can you wrap up, Mr. Kennedy?
And I request this be held, the decision be held in abeyance for 30 days until we can get more information to the board. And Mrs. Frost, you're probably more interested in this because it's your district. I think it should be imperative that you do a little deeper research on the application.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
And we're going to hear other comments, I know, but I guess I would, before we conclude the hearing, ask Ms. Bellows or Mr. Leonard, whoever did as it relates to some of the things that were cited relative to conditions as it relates to the horses in particular. Those are pretty serious matters. Again, there may be other sides to the story, but again, this is a public facility run by a contractor, and I guess I'm going to say that, as it relates to obviously operator, we're going to hear more, but conditions for those horses, again, that are in the charge of people. I don't know if you've had those complaints or those concerns, and you can, at the end of the hearing, we're going to hear some other, but I want to hear some more information about that and whether that's been reported to you, because I think those are very serious circumstances. Not that the rest of the comments aren't serious as well, but thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor. Brentley Cassidy. Followed by Gregory Abbott.
Morning. I'm actually supporting, I checked the wrong thing, that's my apologies. As a combat vet, Marine Corps, twice to Iraq, I've been through a lot of PTSD therapy, and the only one that legitimately helped was riding horses and getting that connection with a horse. And the second I walked up to my horse, just complete peace, 100%. And the second my friend told me that there was actually horse ranch, riding and all that stuff around the Sacramento area, my eyes lit up, because that it's one thing that's hard, no matter what I do, is to get serenity and peace. So that's the only therapy I've ever been to in about 12,000 therapeutic sessions was horses. So thank you.
Thank you. Gregory Abbott. Followed by Tiffany Castillo.
Hello, thank you for hearing me. I got out of the Army in 2010 and started struggling. I fell off. I had no sense of purpose, no direction. I came to Mather. I started drinking and everything fell apart. I came to Mather VA in Sacramento 2018, and I went to treatment and I started to square it away, but I still had no sense of purpose, no sense of direction. And I happened to meet Zach at the VA. I was Ubering to the VA and back, having trouble getting to my appointments, and I was just telling the secretary I have to Uber, and this voice comes out of the back, Roseville, you need a ride? And it was Zach, and we met. He gave me a ride home, and he was just talking to me from there. He got a call to go to the ranch, and I was standing around. I just started helping his brother, and this is Tyler. And then Zach had told me, if you ever want to come out and help out, you're more than welcome. Vets always ride free, and he ended up taking me on a ride. And he told me from there, he's like, you don't have to come out and help, whatever you want to do, but if you ever need a ride to any of your appointments, anything else, myself or Kalea can give you a ride. And ever since that day, if he has to Uber me anything else, if I can't make it, he makes sure that I make it to my appointments. And I go out there, and my life has changed dramatically. I'm not depressed all the time. I'm on no medications, and I go work out there with a horse. I take advantage of the veteran opportunities, and it's changed my life for the better. I have a sense of purpose. My life is better than ever. I can never thank them enough, and they do great things, and we do take wonderful care of those horses. They would never allow this abusive horse or anything else. They love their horses with everything they have, and we all do. It's a big family out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tiffany Castillo, followed by Ronnie Jennings.
So I apologize, I have a cold, but I just wanted to say that Zach and Clay have been like a huge inspiration. I would say personally, but more so for my son. My son's 15 years old and was failing out of high school and started over at Gibson Ranch in May. And from May to today, he's a straight A student. He works with the horses. He's learned about the horses. He's learned how to take care of the horses. It's been his goal to have a horse instead of a car now, but he does understand the responsibilities that go into it. Zach and Kalea have showed him how important it is to take care of them, and just love on them. It's really important to them both, and to Jacob now, to go ahead and love on the horse before riding on the horse. If the horse is tired, the horses get put away. They've canceled many trail rides because the horses were just tired, or it was too hot, or it was wet, whatever the circumstances may have been. The water is a funny situation considering I do volunteer out there, and I change the waters out every time I'm there. So Trail Brothers is important to us as much as Zach and Kalea and their horses.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bonnie Jennings, followed by Daniel Miranda.
Good morning. My name is Ronnie Jennings, and I'm here in support of Trail Brothers. I'm a boarder at Gibson Ranch, and I am a long-time horse person. I've been riding since I was a small child, too. I currently have 4 horses of my own, one of which I board at Gibson Ranch. I'm also a very ardent supporter of Gibson Ranch. I consider it a community jewel, and have been using Gibson Ranch not only to ride, but also my husband and I walk our horses there. We also enjoy the migratory birds, so we are true lovers of Gibson Ranch. I got to know the Trail Brothers fairly recently and have been working there as a volunteer. I'm very impressed with the passion that they have for their horses, and the kindness and gentleness that they also show to the people that come to them for help. I think they will be a tremendous asset to our community. And I think that their vision for the horses is going to really expand the benefit of Gibson Ranch to the surrounding community. Their philosophy is to put the horse first, and that is evident in how much care they give their horses. I recently helped them because of some very high veterinary bills, over $11,000 that they spent on their horses. And I had a retirement party there where I asked my friends to contribute, and it did in fact help them with those bills. I would like to say that the statements I have heard regarding neglect and abuse are false and should really be put aside, because this is a tremendous opportunity to expand and improve our community services with regards to equestrian services.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel? Followed by Samuel Vivalacqua.
Good morning, honorable board members. It's been a long time since I've seen Ms. Frost, and Mr. Cern, I'm glad that you're here by phone. My name is Daniel Miranda. I'm a long resident of the Alberta area. I'm a business owner in Citrus Heights. I've had numerous dealings with the county's activities to include Twin Rivers when it was a problem. And I've looked at Gibson Ranch as a problem for quite some time, and I'm kind of happy to see a new RFP. I can't agree with you, Mrs. Frost. Mr. Ossie has been a bad resident and member of our community, to include Aftershock Country in the park and other messes that were created. I'm glad to see that we're bringing it back to what it's supposed to be, which is an equestrian center. I also have to say that I can't agree with the other speakers as to the abuse. I had the privilege myself of being out Sunday with my children. I observed, I came unannounced, and that wasn't the conditions I observed. I'm also a firefighter paramedic up in Calaveras County, and I currently work in first responders, so I know when people are in distress, I think I can figure out when an animal's in distress. And I didn't see any of those type of behaviors. What I did see was a veterans organization that assists veterans, which I'm also a combat veteran. And I see an organization that is actually starting to clean up and make changes in Gibson that make them a good neighbor and make it a better environment for all of our community. I urge this board to strongly go forward with this RFP. And if they do have the concerns, and I think concerns are always something you always have to take in effect, we have animal control. That's what they're for. Maybe we should have a 30, 60, 90, 60, 180, and a 365-day check. Let them come unannounced. If there's a problem, we'll solve it. If it's not, we go on about it. But the problem is, just because somebody doesn't like that somebody's in business, which is what this sounds like to me, doesn't give people the right to make false allegations. If you have an allegation, bring it forward, let it be investigated, and go forward. This board has been recommended to approve this RFP, and I strongly support it as one of the residents, business owners of the county. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Samuel? Samuel Vivalacqua, followed by Jacob Daggett.
Good morning. My name is Samuel, and I'm speaking on matter 29. It has come to my attention that there has been some oppositions from the community regarding Zach with Trail Brothers LLC receiving their contract. From a community standpoint, I understand their concerns. The last contract was held for 7 years by a man who was said to have resurrected and restored the Gibson Ranch. Zach is simply someone the community does not yet know. I want to remind everyone that a vote was made by Sacramento County Board of Directors for Trail Brothers to take over this contract. I believe they had very good reason to award this contract, especially if it's to replace someone who has been operating it for the past 7 years. I would only ask that the community give Trail Brothers a chance to prove themselves and show what they have to offer. Understand that every business starts somewhere. They may be young, but it just means that a few years down the road, they will have more experience than any new business just starting out. As a personal standpoint, I have known Zach since high school, and is one of the few I've kept in touch with. He had left our junior year to join the military. The day our class walked the stage, Zach was deployed in Afghanistan fighting for our country. There's been times Zach has called me for help. My time is very valuable, but when Zach needed help, I dropped everything, including missing out on work, to make sure I helped Zach with what he needed. That's not something I just go out and do for people and not charge them for my time. Zach is one of those genuinely good people that you would do anything for, and I knew I needed to make sure he could keep operating. I put him and his business needs before my own. I hope that displays to you the kind of person that he is, and that is the kind of person you want running Gibson Ranch. Talking with Zach, he has been living and breathing this project for months, and I don't think you'll have a more motivated person to run Gibson Ranch. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob Daggett. After Jacob is Michael Reed.
Good morning. My name is Jacob Daggett. I've been mentoring under Zachary and Clea since May 25th, 2019. Since that day, I've been coming out there to learn and train with them every week. Me and Zach have been to a Civil War reenactment, and Zachary and Clea even went out of their way to take me to a buck Branham and vaquero roping competition. But my main point is their relationship with their horses. They treat every horse as if it was their own child. And that is the number one reason why I love working with them so much. Zachary gives me so much inspiration throughout all this time. I think it's amazing how good he is with horses. Not only that, he served our country as an Army Ranger for 11 years. All my inspiration for Clea comes from the amount of love she gives her horses, and Clea is still giving me lessons to help me ride better. Whenever I get a lesson, sometimes we end early because I've been told to end on a good note. So I want to end my speech on a good note by saying Zachary and Clea would put the same amount of love and dedication to their horses and to Gibson Ranch. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Layden. you, Michael.
Hi, board. I am Zachary's biological father, and I'm also a combat vet. I am really proud of both of these young people. They've done a tremendous job in building a business, and they've been out there with the community. And not just people that come to Gibson Ranch. They're out here in Sacramento working with the police department, with the sheriff's department. They're doing disadvantaged children events. There's a lot that they're doing besides just the trail riding aspect. They're working with the community. That's a very valuable thing for the park, for your district, Mrs. Frost, and in general for all of Sacramento. It's a great place for anybody to go to get, veteran assistance and support, and to see the love that the two of them have for spending the time with children and the community and the horses themselves. And I've also promised both of them that I would help them with renovations. So you could help me with make sure I have work to do. But thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Layden. Pamela? There we go. Followed by William Dellert, I believe.
Hi, I'm Pamela Layden, and I'm Zach's mom. I just want to say that, Zachary is my hero. And it's really hard to hear people say these things, the few things that are bad about him, because, first of all, he's a man of integrity, and Kalea is incredibly kind and has a lot of patience, and they love their animals. They love the people that they work with. They believe in safety, and they put all these in place so that people have a good experience. I would just really, besides my crying, I'm so sorry about that, but I would just encourage the board, if there is any question as to the health of the animals, to make spot checks or drop in any time, because at any given time you could come to Gibson Ranch and see the care that they are given. It's a public place. There's nothing hidden. There's no, like somebody had mentioned, they've spent a lot of money on health vet checks, and these are facts. And they are mentors, and they believe in collaborating with the community, and they have been doing that. So I just encourage the board to not discount what people say, because obviously, especially when it comes to the health of the horses, I'm a horse lover. Zach's been riding a lot longer than 18 months. He's been riding. I can attest to that because I'm his mom. So, but we love the animals, and just come by if you have any concerns, because that's absolutely not the case. And change is hard for everyone, so I understand that new management taking over when maybe your friends are not going to be the managers of the facility anymore. That's hard, and I get that, but change happens. And anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. William Dellert, I believe, and then Oscar Acosta.
Hello. I just want to say that Zach and Kalea, they're going to do great things for this Gibson Ranch. I mean, just from them being there already, you can see significant change already, and it's not just because I'm pretty much related to them. I'm just saying that you can't go wrong with this decision, so thank you.
Thank you. Oscar Acosta. Followed by Lucy Badenhoop.
Good morning. My name is Oscar Acosta, and I'm speaking on behalf of Trail Brothers. I've been around them for a while, and hearing what they've said about the way they treat their animals is not anything I've experienced. Having dealt with trauma, I've been in law enforcement for 10 years. I've been an officer. I've been a dispatcher. I've heard, I've responded, I've helped, I've reacted. I have my own trauma from it. the love that they give their animals and is reciprocated speaks volumes to their character. An abused animal does not willingly come and love the way that these horses come to them. That being said, with the property, I've heard their plans. I've heard what their dream is, what their vision is for the property, and yeah, repairing the metal barn is top priority, along with every other building that has been neglected for several years now that is in disrepair. That is, I mean, there's so much dry rot because of whatever the previous owner has been doing or not doing. They want to bring life back to Gibson Ranch. They want to bring community to it. They want to hold events that just create community. They want to rehabilitate. They want to help first responders, military, families, anybody who needs it. They welcome everybody with open arms. They really are an inspiration. They really are quality, character-filled, integrity-filled people. Jill, Kalea, Zach, all of them, they have one of the strongest bonds that I have, that I've seen as a team. Thank you.
Thank you. Lucy? Welcome back.
Thank you. I put on my slip that I was neutral on this proposal, and I am. I don't have any special interest one way or the other as to who takes over Gibson Ranch, as long as they preserve the equestrian community that is alive and vibrant in that area. I have surprisingly heard a couple things today that raised some red flags for me, and I would urge the board to investigate before making further action on this item. The red flags I see as a longtime trail person and equestrian are the fact that this company did not have $11,000 to pay their vet bills. So what are they going to do in the future when their animals need veterinary care? The other item is that we've had a witness say that they've seen animals tied for 10 hours at a time. I know, as from my personal experience, that it is dangerous to leave an animal tied and unattended, even for an hour. So if this is happening, there needs to be a personal observer when animals are tied. And then the last thing was the turning loose of a new animal into a herd. This is a red flag. I've learned from my own experience. I had at one point had 2 trail horses, 2 mini horses, and then I added a mule. And the minis and the trail horses got along fine, but the mule did not like the minis. And I, for 5 years, had to keep them separated until the mule passed on. So these are red flags that I would say need to be investigated. And I heard one speaker say that they would like a deferment and some time to gather more information because the process was did not allow them time to research the problems. And I would strongly advise the board to do that and to defer the action for now.
Thank you, Lucy. I have another card for Zachary Layton, but Zachary, you already spoke, right? No? Okay, thank you. There's a lot of similar names today.
And similar hats. So I guess I'm Zachary. I'm one of the Trail Brothers members, and I guess I'll address some of the things that were just spoken about. We have our horses tied up at the tie rail. There's always somebody watching them at all times, and there's always water there. And we feed the horses in the morning, and any horse that performs in the day, whether it's one trail ride, one lesson, they get a performance-based mix that we feed them throughout the day. And if they're there more than 4 hours, we'll feed them again. So they get snacks throughout the day while they're there. They have water at all times, and there's always somebody present to watch them. That was on our agreement with Doug Ossie, and we have stayed true to that the whole time. As far as the financials, we have a deal with Loomis Basin, and we have credit with them. And we pay it off over time, which we could pay it off if we want. We are financially capable, and the directors have already gone over our finances and have proved that we are. Just like anybody else, our business does credit. It's just to defer things over a course of time. And Ronnie's party was just generous and sweet, and they came together for a retirement party that we threw for Ronnie, and they put together a pot of funds, and they're like, we want to help. Willow was the horse. She injured herself, and then through the process, this was Clea's favorite horse. She got laminitis, and her hoof went through, and we had to put her down, and it was really drastic. So it was sad for everybody, and they just wanted to help with the situation. It wasn't charity in a sense. It was just, they were being friendly, welcoming us into their group a little bit. Lastly, we will go over the fact that we put a horse in the pastures. We have 2 pastures on the facility for all of our horses. We have 18 horses on the facility, and they all get along great. We put the horses near each other in stables where they can't actually get to each other first, so they can get to know each other. Once they start to get to know each other and they seem to work fine, then we put those 2 in the group together, and we usually watch them. It sounds like there was a situation where one of them got put into a group and it didn't work out and they weren't watched. Sometimes, I'm not sure what the specific situation was. I don't recall, but we have 18 horses. They're all fat and happy, and they all come straight to us. They all love us. You guys can come anytime. I'd love to see you guys at the ranch. You guys can see how our horses are. Our horses are a testament to how we treat horses. They absolutely love us. They'll follow me around like a puppy dog in the arena. So it's not something that most horses do. So anyway, that's all I got. I'm sorry, guys.
Thank you,
Went over
Zach.
the time.
Thank you, Zach. We appreciate it. Phil, where's this coming? Oh, okay. Yes. Zachary, come back down. Supervisor Cerna, are you watching this at the same time? Oh, okay. All right.
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry, I kind of was choppy. Yeah, so we have a contract or an agreement with Loomis Basin Medical Center for our equine center. We work directly with them. Their surgeon, Dustin Major, is somebody who we have a personal relationship with as well. We have a ongoing credit with them, and we call them out anytime that there's anything wrong with any of our horses, period. The big expense came from mostly just one horse. We had a horse, Willow, who cut herself. We called the surgeon out to stitch up the cut. They didn't clean it out appropriately, and it festered, and then it got worse, and we had to have another surgery. After that surgery, she got laminitis while in their care at their facility, and then we had the doctor and lameness specialist work on trying to save her from that. Over the course of just a few days, it got really bad, and the hoof pushed through her coffin boat and pushed through her hoof, and then we had to put her down. And this was just a short amount of time that we accumulated a lot of debt, but we have the credit with them. Again, we could pay it if we'd like, but they have a good relationship with us, so we deferred it over time. It's just like anything else that businesses have credit for certain aspects, and this is just something that we built a working relationship with them, basically saying that we're going to continue to use them for longevity, and with that in mind, they're willing to work with us on that payment. Does that answer your question? You're asking if I'm sorry, could you repeat that question? Yeah, absolutely not. I plan to bring this contract with Loomis Basin further and work on an agreement with them for the boarding side to defer some of their costs to travel out to the facility if we continue to use them on a regular basis as we do. So there's going to be a working relationship with them on the boarding side as well.
Supervisor Natoli.
Yeah. Zach, while you're there, first, thank you for your service in our nation's military, and appreciate the fact that you're working with other veterans in our community, and obviously a good number of folks here in support, including obviously family and friends, and that's important from the standpoint of your daily life, but obviously for your business as well. I guess I wanted to ask, because again, you addressed one of the items that was brought forward here as a concern, and this is not to get into back and forth, but it was spoken to by a couple of speakers. That is that tying out horses with tack, is it true that they're tied out, even if they get performance mix, for 10 hours in the heat?
So during the summer, we had long hours with working. If the heat got over a certain point, we just canceled every single ride. We wouldn't go if it goes over a certain point. And if we had long hours, the horses got fed multiple times. We always had someone watching them. There was always water for them, and we did hose them off too if we felt that was necessary.
So and again, not being a questioner myself, but the are there kind of recommended conditions, obviously from standpoint of the horse, the horse's age? Being loaded down obviously with tack, even being hosed down, it gets pretty hot. Some of the pictures that were submitted here that, showed temperatures, but we know it can exceed 100 degrees. And obviously if they're being attended to, but are there recommendations within the, equestrian industry, so to speak, relative to that as to how long you would have horses, tied up? Obviously they're standing most of the day, but nonetheless having an attack on them. So I guess I'm just curious about that. Is that you consult with industry experts, maybe you're expert, yourself, but.
So in our proposal that we worked through with the district, we have a health and safety plan in there, and everything within our health and safety plan, we have looked at the industry standards and the legality of it through California, and anything and everything we do with this business, we follow that guideline. So that specific situation, it is addressed in our health and safety plan, and we abide by it.
Yeah, the legality is not unimportant. Obviously, that's the law, but I think it's what's good for the horses, because I've heard you say, and many of the folks who've supported you, that obviously you treat them as if they were your own children. That was the description was made, and so. Because again, those concerns, those allegations, are serious ones, and then any other operator or potential contractor for the county, if those were raised, I would raise the same questions in these chambers. I wanted to ask, and maybe while you're there, and maybe this is for Liz or for Rob. So, with the safety plan that's submitted, we just in the previous action approved folks who oversee the maintenance and care of the grounds and some of the aspects of recreational program out there. Who is it that the contractor reports to relative not only to the safety plan, but who's they accountable to? And to points that were made even by those that support the Trail Brothers contract this morning, said there may be some spot checks, periodic checks. Again, that's not to be checking up on folks necessarily, but if these concerns were raised here in an open session, so who is it, Liz, that's responsible that Zach either would report to, or if concerns came forward, whether they were founded or unfounded, who sorts all of it out?
So he would be reporting to me. As the director, I would be the one managing that agreement, and of course I would rely upon my colleague at Animal Care and Regulation to ask if he could do some spot checks if it became a concern, and we could definitely work that into so we can alleviate those concerns.
So do you make, because again now Gibson Ranch is going to be in the county inventory, so you're going to make regular rounds, again, not just for the Trail Brothers, but obviously the facility is that, I mean, obviously as director, you've got 23 miles of parkway and a whole lot of facilities and managing a crew of folks. So what does that mean? That he reports directly to you? Obviously the contract's under your authority,
Correct.
authorized by the board, but what's that mean in the interface between Mr. Layden and his organization, or any other contractor we have?
So if there are any concerns with any of the contracts that are coming forward, they would come to my office and I would investigate them, either myself or I would have my staff investigate them. I can attest to the fact that over the last month, I have made several spot visits to Gibson Ranch, specifically to the Trail Brothers operation, both on weekday and weekend, unannounced, just so that I could see what it looked like for myself. And I was satisfied that they were doing a very good job. And additionally, they have been out at Gibson Ranch since May, because they were working for Doug Ossie, and at that, we have not received any complaints during that period of time.
Okay, all right. And I guess for those that either board and or ride, is there a place where folks, if they wanted to engage, either tell about good service or not so good service or any concerns, how is that funneled through? So that it doesn't just stop with either a park employee or with a contractor employee. How does that get?
I would expect that people would be able to reach out to my office directly. Obviously, we also have our Dry Creek Parkway Advisory Committee where they could raise a concern at that advisory committee level, and or our Recreation and Park Commission. And
one last question then. So as it relates to, you talked about your partner in animal care, obviously Mr. Dickinson and County Animal Care and Regulation. So under the contract auspices, again, we don't have, numerous contracts for animal care or boarding in county facilities. Is there some regular interface? Is there an annual visit with Zach? Does Mr. Dickinson look at the safety plan if there were concern, but not just a concern, just developing a positive relationship, I guess, so that, in the event that there was something that was noticed and or even for advice. So I guess, how does that work? I mean, again, if people are busy as department heads, but I'm curious about this because, as we embark upon this and what's recommended today, I want to know what that would be.
Typical in our agreements of this nature are at least an annual review of an operations plan. That's what we had in place for the previous lease out at Gibson Ranch. It's what we have in place for many of our others. So we would ensure that that took place. But I imagine I would be out there much more frequently than just once.
I appreciate your visits. That's helpful to know. But so is beyond a concern or a complaint, does Mr. Dickinson, the director of animal care, or a designee, do they have some interface with? In this case, it would be Trail Brothers or whoever preceded him, and I guess whoever might succeed him. So, what's that relation? Is it just on a complaint basis, or is there some positive interaction? I.e., we get horses from time to time that come into the shelter that are abandoned and in a state of neglect. Again, whether they'd be candidates for Gibson Ranch or not, I don't know. But I mean, so I guess I'm looking at how do you develop that relationship beyond just have somebody called in a concern, so call Dave or an animal control officer out to the facility. Do we do any relationship building with? We absolutely will be doing that relationship building. In addition, for a lot of our other agreements that we have with other leasees or nonprofit organizations, we have annual reports that they make to our Recreation and Park Commission. For example, the American River Parkway Foundation gives an annual report. Our Dry Creek our Dry Creek Ranch House for our Historical Society, they give an annual report. American River Natural History Association gives an annual report, which gives the public an opportunity to hear the activities over the year and the plans for the future years, and so that helps build the positive interaction. Okay. Let me just pinpoint my question, and I just want to ask another question. So, what about the interface? Because that was cited as being, well, if there's a concern beyond going to the parks, you could go to animal care. So, have we introduced Mr. Layden, or we intend to introduce Mr. Layden to Mr. Dickinson at animal care, or? Yes, okay. That is my intent. And in casual conversations with Mr. Dickinson, I have mentioned that we will be taking back over Gibson Ranch and the equestrian operation, and we talked about what we might be able to do as far as partnerships with our departments. Okay. All right, good. Zach, you still want to kind of respond? Thank you, Liz. You may want to respond to the question as well. So.
Okay, can you repeat the question?
I just said, is there anything you wanted to respond to? You wanted to come for a moment ago and say something, so I wanted to.
Well, she did a great job answering. Yeah. I just wanted to say that we are ready and will continue to work closely with Liz and anybody else who wants to work with us. I know that they have other projects going on, like they were talking to FFA and the Future Farmers of America and other sorts, and we as a company are excited to work with those organizations through Liz as well. So.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Zach.
Supervisor Frost.
I have a question that probably involves Liz and Zach. And so, Liz, if you could approach. I just wanted to go back to the veterinary costs. And I'm under the assumption that that type of expense is not something that happens regularly. It's occasionally something happens while they're under your care that you're responsible for that cost. But as a general rule, the owner of the horse is responsible for their veterinary costs, their normal everyday veterinary costs. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. The person who owns the horses is in charge of paying their vet bills. That was our horse that we own personally. And it was an outlier. It's not a normal circumstance. The horse got injured and it should have been a quick fix. We had the vet come out and stitch it up. And then it just, this is what the vet said, every single worst case scenario happened over and over and over and over again, making that whole situation just a disaster. So,
let's see. I remember before you that we did have a lot of complaints around the equestrian for a while, and I haven't heard any complaints. So Liz, I mean, I'm under the impression that up until today, I haven't heard any complaints about the equestrian. I don't know how long you've been there, Zach. How long have you been?
Since officially I got there the end of April, and I did a cold start, and then I started, I grand opened on May 27th, and we have a little over 300 reviews through Yelp, Google, Facebook, Groupon, and they're all 5 stars except for 2. So on that aspect, we are, we're blowing it out of waters right now.
And you have oversight in that you can, you have the capacity to, at fault, immediately cancel the contract.
Correct. The agreement has a 90-day no-cause termination, and with cause, we can immediately terminate if needed.
And does this contract take effect immediately? Is there an overlap? I'm wondering if someone came up suggesting that we put this off for 30 days, but I'm concerned about continuity of care for animals, and I'm not sure I see any problem with this contract. So, but is this taking effect immediately upon the dissolution of our agreement with Doug O.C., or?
Correct. It is envisioned that his contract would start December 1st, 2019, so that there is a continuity of service provided to our boarders.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Linda Dobson. Hey, Zach, I bet you never thought you'd be on first name basis with the entire Board of Supervisors.
Hi, my name is Linda Dobson, and I actually live in just south of Redding, California, way out in the country, and I have a granddaughter that takes riding lessons from Trail Brothers. I need to preface my words here with a response to the people that are having issues with this. I live way out in the country, and if I was driving down the road, which I have, and have seen animals in neglect, the first thing I do is I call animal control and I lodge a complaint. I say something about it. This, I'm understanding, has been about 3 months or 4 months or 5 months, and I don't know that there's been an actual complaint lodged. So if it was that important or if it was that serious, and it's enough to bring to you to say these people should not have the access to this, to Trail Brothers. Why wasn't it important enough to actually take care of it if it was real when it happened? That's the first thing. I have an issue with that. If you see something wrong, you should take care of it, not wait 3 months until it's a support for you in something that you want. Oh, now it's that important, I need to speak up. I don't live like that. I stand up for what I believe in. So I need to tell you about my granddaughter. My granddaughter is Evelyn, and she's 10 years old. She comes and spends the summers with us up in Redding. And at 8 years old, she sat on my couch and she said, "Grandma, I want to learn to ride a horse really, really bad." And I pushed it off like, yeah, another one of those things that kids talk about. And then she kept at it for weeks. And finally I said, all right, fine. If you're wanting to ride a horse, I'll get you lessons. I got her lessons up in Redding, or in Cottonwood. And then we ended up coming for the school down here. And then she had lessons down here. But the places that we found couldn't take her to where she wanted to go. What she wants to do. She would like to learn to barrel race. She's got a very strong mind of her own, and she has an idea of what she wants, and she found it. When the first lesson we went to, we got into the car after we were driving home, after Kalea gave her her first lesson, and she looked at me with this rapt look on her face, and she said, "Grandma, I finally found it." She said, "Oh, Grandma, that was the best lesson I have ever had." And you know what? Every single Monday, when we get in the car and we drive back to her house, I come down from Redding every week to Sacramento to daycare her.
Can you wrap up, Linda?
I will.
Thank you.
Every week she gets in the car and she says, "That was the best lesson I've ever had." So I have to tell you that she wants to have a horse. She's selling eggs from my farm in Redding to buy a horse, and she wants to board it at Trail Brothers there, and she looks forward to that. I don't think that you can go wrong with somebody that has a heart for a place like that.
Thank you, Linda.
Like they have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martha Eubanks. Martha is followed by Lydia Willett.
I moved to California and...
You want to pull the microphones together? We can.
Yes,
Thank
I'm
you.
very short. I moved to California in June of 2010 from Alabama. I had no one here. I
never would have guessed.
I talk slow. So anyway, my job is what brought me out here to California. And not having any friends or family out here, just relying on the people that I work with. But I do not work with Zach or Kalea. But I did have an encounter with them, and we were strangers, and out of that, we have become friends. It was in December of 2017, and I had stopped for gas. I was on my way to a doctor's appointment. I had surgery and developed an infection, and the doctor wanted to see me. Well, I had a brand new car, and the car didn't have the key, it had the remote. So when I stopped for gas and closed my car, it locked me out. I couldn't get in. And so I had gone into the store and I asked the guy if he would call like AAA or somebody for me, and he said no, that he would not help me. And I kind of like looked around and I'm like, I'm in Wheatland. I don't know anybody here. I can't even call. So I even looked for a payphone, but I didn't even have a quarter to make a payphone. Zach heard the guy tell me that he would not help me, and he goes, what can I do? I said, I need a phone call. I need to call AAA. Well, Kalea was with him, and she called. Well, we saw a restaurant, so we were going to wait for AAA. So he goes, come on, let's go get some breakfast. Well, it was my intentions to go and buy these people breakfast. They're helping me. He bought breakfast. He even saw a police officer, waved the police officer down to tell them my car was locked. Anyway, we finally got the car unlocked, and after this, he invited me out to the ranch, and I have taken some other people out to the ranch. I haven't ridden on a horse since I was 13. I'm 58. And I had the best time, and I support anybody that supports our veterans. Thank you.
Thank you. Lydia Willett, followed by Jill
Hello. So my story is with them. I like to ride horses. I own St. Bernards for years and years, so I'm good with large animals. I've done everything there is to do with St. Bernards. I have 3 living in my house. And my point is that large animals are different than small animals, and horses and St. Bernards are kind of close. So, my point is that I always look for places to ride because I can't have horses, but I've ridden them. All my friends have horses. I've been around horses for over 30 years, so I know care of large animals and all of this. So one day I decided I wanted to go on a trail ride. I looked up on Google, I found this place, I booked a ride with Zach, and when I went out there, it was one of the best private rides I've ever had. He was, not only did we just go out on the ride, he explained everything about the horse. He was teaching me how to care for the horse. We talked about that. He taught me more about saddles and all these things. And then we went out on the ride, and then he was telling me about his organization and his vision with this organization. And mind you, this was it was probably like in July or something when I went out there. So they just started, and he was telling me all these wonderful things, and I thought, well, this is great. I haven't come across this in a long, long, long time in my dealings with animals. So I said, I really like to take a lesson. I set up my first lesson. Well, I've been taking lessons since. I've had 20 lessons now, and I just signed up for another 10. And Kalia is my instructor, and she's wonderful, and she really connects with the horses. They know exactly what your skill level is, and they work and build on that skill level. They are wonderful people. They treat everybody like family. And from my perspective, and like I said, I've been around animal people my whole life. That's all I do. And so I definitely would really strongly urge you guys to consider the concession agreement with Trail Brothers.
Thank you. Jill Russa, followed by Mike Anderson.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. Thank you for your time this morning. I am one of the co-owners of Trail Brothers, and would like to take a moment of your time. Couple points of clarification. Board Member Frost, you asked this morning about our ability to pay for veterinary bills. Yes, we definitely have the contract that Zach was talking about, but we also have quite a bit of money that we have set aside in our account as well. So if there were any problems, we would certainly take care of that. Board Member Natoli, you asked about the facilities out there. We have a lot of plans, as you heard from some of our folks, to get those facilities up and in very well working order. It's our vision and our dream to put Gibson Ranch on the map as one of the most premier boarding facilities that there is in this area, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it with the people that you see in this room and the people of the community of Alberta. We're going to bring them all together to do that. I'd like you to look at this room here and know that what Gibson Ranch is about family. Our community is being brought together. We believe in giving back to our community, and we're doing that obviously through giving free rides to veterans, but we also bring back to the community through our camps for inner city youth. 3 weekends ago, we gave free trail rides to first responders, because that's what we're about, is giving back to this community, and this community then gives back to us, and that's going to be what Gibson Ranch is about. So I truly hope that you will consider granting us this concession, and you will see that by doing so, you will find tenfold given back to you and this community of Alberta. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Mike Anderson, followed by Regan Rose.
Hello, my name is Mike Anderson, and I've had horses and ridden horses for over 50 years. Over 3 years ago, I gave 3 of my horses to Zach for part of his programs, and I couldn't be higher, couldn't endorse a group higher than Zach and Kalea and the Trail Brothers. Well before Gibson Ranch in their other locations for years I have showed up every couple months to just see my horses, and I would have known after having those horses for over 10 years that if anything was wrong with them or any of the other horses that were there. So many, many, many occasions, every couple months for years, I have observed their operations, and they've been nothing but top-notch. And they are the highest quality of people, both Zach and Kalea, and I couldn't recommend them more. And the last thing I'll mention is one of my 3 horses had not an injury from performing, but just something wrong with her, and she was an older horse, and most people would have probably put her down, but they spent thousands of dollars to get her taken care of, and she has come back, and we'll be going to see her today when we're finished here. And that's just an example. They do treat all their horses like family. I can attest to that from many years of observation. And I couldn't be happier that my horses are with them, and they will always be with them. And if I could give them more, I would give them more. Thank you.
Thank you. Regan Rose, followed by Greg Rose.
Hi, I'm a boarder at Gibson Ranch. I've been boarding there for about 5 years, and I speak for kind of a little tiny group of boarders who are too scared to get up here themselves. We strongly support Trail Brothers. I've been a horsewoman for over 50 years and a strong proponent for animal rights. I have been up at that barn. I'm there every day because I love my horse. I go at different times of the day, and I've seen how they treat their animals. They're very well cared for. And speaking to the park, there's a lot of times I've been worried you guys were going to shut it down. I love that park. I'm a displaced country girl. I grew up in Vermont, and now I'm in the city, so I go to Gibson to get country. And I love it that the Trail Brothers is bringing the community in. I'm just so excited when I see all these groups of little kids out there getting to know the animals, and other groups coming out and using the park. Seeing a huge increase around the equestrian side. So I'm very excited about their plans for Gibson Ranch, and I just want to say that they are taking very good care. Their animals are actually in better shape than the boarders' animals out there, because our animals tend to be overweight, which is very unhealthy, and theirs are in perfect shape. And those kids have a very strong work ethic. You think the horses are out there for 10 hours. Those kids are out there working 14, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. They love what they do, and they are very good for Gibson, very good for our community. So I hope you do vote to accept their contract. Thank you.
Thanks. Greg Rose, followed by Becky Hers.
Thank you for moving forward and trying to do this for the equestrian section. And I know, having something that is viable, that brings revenue to the park is an important thing to you. And I really feel that the building of what these people are going to be able to do from what they have done. When they went out there and I met them at first, they were thrown into an area. They weren't thrown into a set-up facility where they would be able to do everything. They had a couple rails and a little building, and they have built this up, taking care of 13 horses with minimal help. They have brought an electronic presence. They have used the media to grow their business. And all these things are things that, in this techie world, that's what's needed for Gibson Ranch, because a lot of people don't even know it exists. And these are the kind of people that are able to do that. And they were able to juggle all of these different things and still take care of their horses. Granted, things may not have been just the perfect conditions every single second of every single day, but I have a different perception of how they take care of their horses, and I know they are well taken care of. They have water out there all the time. They have even provided shelters for them, in the summer when it got really hot and there was no shade at all. They have done everything they can and done a super job with what they had in the length of time. They have a constant stream of people that are coming out there and drawing people to the park. Now, the equestrian area has that, it's been neglected. You know, I know there may not have been specific complaints, Sue, but, you know, for the equestrian area, it was treated as a secondhand citizen by the previous management. There was a line that was drawn between the two. The maintenance men couldn't cross that line. You couldn't trim. The whole barnyard was a wreck. It is filled with derelict vehicles.
Can you wrap up, Greg? Can you wrap up?
Okay, all kinds of different things. So anyway, they're going to bring something new that will attract people to this park, and they are selfless. They are hardworking, and I expect nothing more than for them to bring that very exact same thing to the equestrians, and I am welcoming it.
Thank you, Greg.
That's great.
Becky Hers, followed by Judy Bernal.
Hello, my name is Becky Hers, and I had the pleasure of being part of the selection committee that reviewed the 2 RFPs that came forward for the equestrian services at Gibson Ranch. I am here to support the Trail Brothers proposal. In financial considerations, the Trail Brothers proposal was the only proposal that had positive financial impact for the county parks, contributing $25,000 minimum annually towards the parks, along with offering to assist with capital improvement projects, which are going to be much needed at that park. They also have extensive recreation service offerings, 5 times that of the other contract, and with extensive outreach to military vets along with other user groups. They were the only proposal that included health and safety protocols, emergency procedures, pest management plan, and nutrition standards for the equestrian services. Their experience in education demonstrated a higher level of education and certification in areas of equestrian, and most impressive to me was just the passion that the stakeholders of the Trail Brothers, that the owners of Trail Brothers brought in, and their ability to bring in stakeholders and other community members to help participate in the recreation programs, in the community participation. I think you can see here that they have a knack for building community support. So again, as part of that selection committee, I just want to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy Bernal, followed by Leon Phillips.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to address you. I am in support of the Trail Brothers program, and I am here as a personal friend of Jill Rusi. I believe, as I think you do as well, that good people take good care of animals. Good people take good care of their children. Good people take care of their neighbors and friends, as many of these stories have showed. I am a friend. My personal experience with Jill, as a strong mother, as a mother of a special needs child, as a friend that comes to everyone's aid immediately, I am very proud to be here today in her support. I have one quick story about Jill, my favorite one. As she is the epitome of strength, she has had a long career with the Army Corps of Engineers. I was speaking with her on the phone one day, and she goes, "Judy, I'm sorry, I have to go. A Black Hawk helicopter is waiting for me." I personally think that's very cool. But
she's blushing.
So don't let that little lady don't have any underestimations of that little lady. And I also, so sorry if it's my moment. If this is the trail mothers, watch out. She will be the trail mother out there. So, taking care of special needs children, taking care of special needs veterans, sounds like they're going to have fulfilling the special needs of the entire community. And I thank you all for such joy. Thank you.
Thank you. Leon Phillips. Leon? Okay. Rachel Reome.
Good morning. My name is Rochelle Riome, and I am here speaking on behalf of the Trail Brothers at Gibson Ranch. I'm a veteran of the United States Air Force. I served 2 tours overseas in support of the war of terrorism. I was diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety after my return. I've been in therapy and treatment since 2003, and it's been an uphill battle. Until recently, anybody that knows me knows my struggles with these things. Trail Brothers, who offers free rides and services to all veterans, has been an integral part of my treatment program, supplementing what I get through the VA, which, if anybody knows, is limited due to budget cuts and short staff. My therapist and psychiatrist both endorse my participation in the programs that Trail Brothers offers, as it is unique to the area, and there are numerous studies that show that horses are effective in cutting down symptoms of PTSD and anxiety disorders by 80%. That's huge. They have both seen an incredible amount of growth and change and healing, more than ever before than with any other treatment program that I've been a part of. And I've done everything. For the first time in my life, since 2003, I've finally been able to go off my last medication. At one point, I was on 7. And I credit my time to working with the staff and horses at Trail Brothers to that. The program that they offer veterans has changed my life. To take this program away would greatly impact my life in a negative way and take away the valuable resource to the community and other veterans like myself when sources are already so scarce. I hope I'm able to continue the program and that my progress forward healing and being healthy is able to continue, and that this is something that is offered to other veterans in our community as well as first responders. Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Linares. Did I get that right? Followed by Jessica Taylor.
Good morning. I thought I'd never get here. I got this whole speech written up, but you've heard most of it already. A young man named Zach walked in the VFW post for a mile from the ranch, and he said, I'm moving here from Quincy, and I'm going to transfer to this post. I want to be involved. In a 5-minute conversation, it kind of went like this. I said, I don't have anything to offer 30-year-old, but you do. He said, you're exactly right. So I had him run for junior vice. He's now the junior vice commander of the VFW post. And then I found out about the horses. I haven't ridden the horses. I've been to the ranch a few times, and I haven't seen anything wrong there. What I have seen is he's taking care of the veterans with PTSD. It's Not Okay project. He's worked with them. They handle PTSD and problems for first responders. They just had 70 kids there for inter city use with the Citrus Heights Police Department. So we are really good as VFW, sitting in the 4 walls and taking care of veterans that are in the building. What he's doing is he's bridging that gap between us and the community. Nobody else does that, not like he's doing it. So I'm here to tell you our 1,170 members he has our full support. I'm also a junior vice commander at District 17. Commander Will Buck sends his support for the district, and Commander Mike Kuznick from the Department of California sends his support to help this young man. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica Taylor. Jessica's followed by Carol Thomas.
Hello, everybody. I'm not really sure what hasn't been said that's already amazing about these people, because that's what they are. They're just simply amazing. What they do is amazing. I had my notes, but I don't know if I'm going to follow it. Trail Brothers provides not just a place to ride horses, but a place, like they've all said, to have a sense of family, have a sense of community. And in a place of Sacramento that is thousands and thousands of people, sometimes you feel like the only person. So to be around people that have the same values and the same interest at heart is pretty amazing. They each understand people. Zachary, because he's a veteran and just an amazing person, he's phenomenal at understanding people and their needs. Kalea, to me, is a real life horse whisperer. She's just simply amazing with the horses. Jill is the backbone and is changing every aspect of Trail Brothers. Not just Trail Brothers, but Gibson Ranch as a whole. You know, we want to include things that have been lost, like the Civil War reenactment and stuff like that. The people have fun, but when I'm there, I notice that it's the horses that are having fun, and that's really important because people have said some negative things, and that's just not the case. The horses are very well taken care of. They love what they do. They love giving the pony rides with the kids, and I like to be a part of it because we get to surpass expectations of these kids and these families and show them love and support and, ways to grow as a person. I am currently pursuing a career in equestrian therapy, and that's the direction that Trail Brothers want to go. For me, it's to give back to the community because horses have given me so much over my entire life. And the thing that I love the most is, like this t-shirt that I'm wearing today, we were a part of the It's Not Okay program. We help the children with different camps and stuff like that. It's really amazing to be able to teach the kids and how to ride and how to utilize horsemanship and, to incorporate it into their own daily life. The sole purpose is to give back to the community. But the thing that I love the most, and that what I get out of the most of Gibson Ranch and Trail Brothers, is the pure happiness and smiles that I see from the people that come to ride the horses or just are walking around. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Carol?
Yeah, hi, I'm Carol Thames. That's why I don't order pizza with my last name. Supervisor Frost, I'm from your district and the other side of the valley here out near Rancho Marietta. Thank you for everything you do. I want to thank all of the veterans in here. I'm touched by all your stories, and I thank you all for doing what you did for all of us. So thank you. I'm going to try and make it real brief. I'm going to reflect on something that someone said about seeing a horse for 10 hours. If I saw a dog in a car for 5 minutes, I would break the window. So I don't think someone that's an animal lover would let someone hold a horse for 10 hours in that situation. So I'm going to think that she would have done something at that point. On item 28, you guys talked about change and how change was good for Gibson Ranch. And what I'm seeing here is that this group of people are bringing a lot of change with Trail Brothers out at Gibson Ranch. I never even knew about Gibson Ranch, but you know what? I have a special needs child who used to participate in Project Ride, and I'm gonna take the time to drive out there and see Gibson Ranch. And I think that the social media aspect of what these guys are doing is a big plus for the community. I think that they brought a proposal together. You had a staff of well-qualified people that went over that proposal. They selected these people to take that position. You did not have any problems or hearsay since now. So I don't understand why there'd be any conflict to have these people take over there. I would know Jill personally. I know she surrounds herself with winners. And I don't know Zach and Clea, but what I've heard is amazing. And by you guys having affiliation with Jill, I support you, but I know I support this woman right here. So I hope you follow through with this proposal.
Thank you. Veronica Sater? Veronica? I might be saying your last name wrong. Nope. Okay. Samuel Cole? After Samuel is Christopher Trinchera.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and the board. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide a verbal comment. Really appreciate that. So, in all honesty, I don't have a whole lot of experience with horses. A couple of months back, or a month or so back, my wife proposed the opportunity to go on a date, and we go trail riding on some horses. She had found a advertisement online. I think it was through Groupon or something of the sort. And I was like, yeah, let's try it. Let's give it a shot. So we showed up at Trail Brothers, and Zach took us on the ride, and just the experience was pretty awesome. I mean, talking to Zach, the level of enthusiasm and passion that he displayed was honestly just infectious. To be able to, like, I practically saw, of course, you know, the land, it is what it is right now, but to be able to see it through his eyes, he has a vision for what he sees, and I could practically see what he was seeing and the way he was describing it, the level of energy, enthusiasm. It was just quite an experience. And then since then, we've been going back, and I've been able to speak with Kalea more and seeing her passion for the horses and how knowledgeable she is. And we found out they have a program, in fact, called the Atticus program. And my wife and I, we have a 3-year-old, and they have a program to start training them how to ride. And at first I was like, wow, I didn't even know that was possible. But sure enough, we just by meeting them and talking to them, the level of trust that I had and the way that I could see that they were caring for the animals and the level of safety. I mean, I felt willing to bring my own child to learn and ride with them. And I'd like to share a photo, if that's okay. This is Camden. And it's pretty amazing how excited Camden is about riding. I mean, on Wednesdays and Fridays, he spends all day talking about Maggie and Ollie and the horses that he's been on, and he talks about Kalea, and it's just been quite the experience. And so I just wanted to say I think it's pretty cool, something pretty special what they're doing, and I am here to show my support. I think you should definitely consider adopting their resolution. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
All right. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would just like to give my perspective on this.
I'm sorry, your name goes so I make sure.
I'm sorry, Christopher Trincara.
Thank you.
Yes. My perspective is I'm the father of Atticus and the Atticus program, I guess. My son means everything to me. My background is not in horses. My background's in economics and banking. And I left that job to do the most challenging and rewarding thing, and that's raise my son. So when this was proposed to me, I had a little caution with my son being on a large animal, but through that, he's grown. He's developed confidence, and not that he didn't have it, but he has kids around him, and particularly there's this little girl named Chloe, and she's very shy. But I've seen her develop this sense of confidence, and it was really cool to see. And I've gone on a few rides with him, and I see even more confidence from my son too. And I think for me, that's what's most important is, giving the kids in our community, the best tools and resources to be the best they can be in a world that's kind of, losing its sense almost maybe. But the only thing I've seen from Trail Brothers is honesty, integrity, and those are good values, and I want my son around it, and I will continue that. And the moment that I ever see anything different than that, I wouldn't, but these are good people, and I think they are a really good fit for the community. And I'm going to wrap it up with just this sense that it's always harder to build something. It's way easier to destroy something. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles Dodson. Charles Dodson.
Okay. He's coming. He's coming.
Okay. Thank you. Charles will be followed by Connor Shelton.
Good morning, sir. My name is Chuck Dodson. I worked for Wells Fargo for 35 years. I've been boarding at Gibson for 10 years and riding for over 20. My horse is on YouTube playing basketball. So you can. Anyway, I want to speak in support of the Trail Brothers. Zach and Clay are great horse people. I see them put people who have never ridden before on horses every day. Everybody has a fun and safe experience. They have the right horses, the experience, and the right equipment to get the job done. And I'll tell you this, I'm out there literally every day, and I've never seen anything remotely resembling neglect or abuse. These two people have brought a new level of energy to the ranch. They understand horses, horse people, and people who want to learn about horses. They're great role models for the young people who come out. They always have a smile and a kind word for everybody, even a cranky old guy like me. These are the people that the boarders want to see running the equestrian operation at Gibson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chuck. Connor Shelton.
Hi. So I've been mentoring under Zach and Clea for about a month, and I just want to say before I met them, I was a college dropout with not really any direction in life. I knew I wanted to be in the equestrian world, but I didn't have like any friends, or I didn't know anyone in that arena or anything. And so I just went on a trail ride one day and expressed that interest to Zach, and he said that I could volunteer there and just gain knowledge about horses. And since then, I am going to be attending farrier school in January. He's set me up with numerous opportunities since then. And I just want to say they're great people. There's not a lot of people that are just willing to help everyone they meet. And yeah, they're going to be great for Gibson Ranch. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good luck. John Benson. As the amazing Karnak said, I hold in my hand the final card.
Good morning, John Benson.
John.
I've been out at Gibson Ranch for a little over a year and a half now. I wasn't real pleased with where the ranch had been looking, but since Trail Brothers has come in, I've got a whole new outlook. I've talked with Kalea and Zach quite a bit. I'm loving what I'm seeing. Zach has quite a vision for what the place should be. The camaraderie out there amongst the owners or the potential operators and the boarders is quite amazing. Everybody wants to get together and help out as much as they can. As far as animal neglect is concerned, I saw a few animals come in at the beginning that I understand were rescues. They were kind of skinny. You can't tell which animals those are now. They're beautiful. I haven't seen any poorly behaved animals. It's just a good place. I love what I'm seeing. I hope you'll consider giving this operation to Trail Brothers. Good people.
Thank you. Okay, as I said, that is the final card. I take it nobody else in the audience wants to speak, so we will bring it back to the board, and I will start by asking if Supervisor Cerna has any questions or comments. Thank you. Supervisor Frost.
Yes, I also want to thank everyone for coming out and sharing your experiences with Gibson Ranch and the equestrian facility. I know that it's difficult. I understand that the horses are very important. They're like family, and I understand even maybe like kids, and that their routine care and just the facilities that you put them in, it's very important to you that they receive the kind of care that you would want your family to have. So I'm sensitive to everyone on all sides of this. I also want to say that I have the utmost confidence in Liz Bellis and her ability to oversee and manage our parks. She's done an amazing job, and she's actually, she and the staff have done a great job in kind of vetting this whole RFP process and making their recommendations. I'm so inspired by some of the things I heard today. I want you to know that my staff and I, we go on these retreats every now and then. They're like team building retreats, and I want you to know that they're emailing me saying, we want to go there for our next retreat. So I'm pretty sure you're going to be getting me on a horse, and I'm not really a horse person, so I'm going to need a little bit of help on that. I have not received one complaint in District 4 since April, so I wanted to, make that public testimony, and I have talked with Liz Bellis, who has not received complaints, and so that's important that, when we hear people talk, the walk and the talk, if it matches, you have a greater deal of confidence. I also am comfortable that the contracts that we have put into place some safeguards so that if something starts to slip, we can have communications and get everything back on track. And it's clear that the Trail Brothers, their proposal was far in advance of all the other proposals as far as cost versus benefit to the county. And so in my review of that, I felt that way. I do support Trail Brothers and would like to move approval of staff's recommendation.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second, and Supervisor Natoli.
Yep. I too intend to support the proposal here today. I just want to say that this hearing was one of the more interesting, but certainly with a lot of compelling testimony. We heard from folks that have relocated here from Vermont and Alabama. We heard from folks from Reading and Quincy and from all over the region. We heard about a store in Wheatland that may not want to have your car lock your keys in your car. And a whole lot of other things, including Black Hawk helicopters, Trail Mother, Smiles, first rides, first dates, experiences with children.
How about payphones?
Huh?
Payphones were mentioned.
Payphones. I didn't know there was still a quarter. I don't know. If you had a quarter, I'm sure you could have used a payphone. But a lot of heartfelt stories. And again, I think the thing about a public hearing is that you get a chance for folks, and maybe this is the first time down here, it was the first time on a horse for some of you more recently, first time in one of these hearings, but we hear many matters, and many of them very serious, and obviously this one has the level of interest that's brought all of you here today. I will just say, as you heard on the previous item, for those of you who were here for the entire hearing this morning, that during my term on the board, certainly Gibson Ranch has been a topic from time to time as it relates to its future. And I think that one of the things that I heard from folks here this morning is that as it relates certainly to the equestrian uses, but also to the park itself, that is not only important, but that it has a bright future. And I appreciated, I think, Jill's comments, as I did all the others, regarding wanting to make this a premier facility. As I think it's important that whether it's a premier facility or not to the to the broader world, it's important for our residents, for those that travel distances to come there, for those that get the experiences that build the friendships, the relationships that support one another in their lives, that help them heal, help them to feel good about themselves, gain the confidence that's spoken to here, the smiles, the joy, obviously some of the tribulations that may go with with any operation, but. Again, I think today's hearing certainly bore out both some concerns that were expressed, but also I think a high level of support for what the operators here, Trail Brothers, and obviously all the partners that are here this morning want to do. And I would just say too that one of the things that relates to this item that I heard Liz in her presentation say that there was going to be a sharing on the barn as it relates to the repairs there. I would hope that in this contract we have the flexibility to look at, because in my view, $25,000 is inconsequential to the parks budget, but when we have facilities that have, I think, undergone the rigors of time and really, because of the high use, need to be invested in, I would hope that our contract provides that flexibility, not only for what the county contribution might be, but that if, as they prosper with this operation, that we could actually see those monies go back into the facilities, into the program development, because to me, that's what's important. If it was a net break even, that to me is fine, because I think that what we need to do is to have programs such as this, whether it's at Gibson Ranch or anywhere else, and if we can have facilities that are in stellar shape and have the participation by people of all ages, from all walks of life, those of us service in our military and our law enforcement, that to me is what's important. And I think that as we look at this in future budget years, again, hopefully have flexibility built in the contract, because I want to see that be a facility that we can all be proud of, but also obviously the soul of that heart is just a program that Trail Brothers wants to bring. So I support this morning. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll just say briefly, as I alluded to at the beginning, I outed myself as someone who did grow up around horses and has spent quite a bit of time on horseback in my life. And I will tell you this, and I say this with all the greatest love and admiration, there's no one more judgmental than horse owners. And there's no horse owner that I've ever seen that would see mistreatment go by and then get up to the podium and speak on behalf of a program like this. So I'm confident that these horses are being taken care of well. I will ask that you continue to strive to do so and be exemplary to your community. So with that, we have a motion and a second. Would please call the roll.
Supervisor Frost? Aye. Natoli?
Aye.
Cerna? Kennedy?
Aye.
Unanimous vote with those members present.
And with that, we have no vice chair at the dais, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to take a 2-minute break. Right, Supervisor Cerna, are you ready? Okay, then we will come back into order. And would the clerk please call the roll to reestablish a quorum?
Supervisor Frost?
Here.
Natoli?
Here.
Cerna? Kennedy?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you.
Item number 30, approval of a memorandum of understanding between the Board of Supervisors and Sheriff regarding the Office of Inspector General, and approve the selection of a new Inspector General, and authorize the county executive to negotiate and sign the contract.
Thank you very much. I have asked the CEO to allow me to take the lead on this, which is somewhat uncustomary, but not entirely outside the realm of has happened before. Just because as board chair for the past almost year, I've been as intimately involved with this subject matter as anybody. So I'm not going to go over and belabor the entire staff report and the board letter. I'm going to point out just a few key points as far as how we got to where we are today and where I would like to see us go from here. First of all, it's customary and long before predates me, predates everybody at this dais except for Mr. Natoli, that the selection of an OIG is done by the board chair, and the selection process is carried on by the board chair and the sheriff, with consultation from labor partners in law enforcement, and that being the Department of Sheriff's Association and Lima. In 2015, when we hired our last chair, I believe that's how it was carried out, with Supervisor Cerna as the chair of the board and Sheriff Jones. Subsequent to that process, we hired an IG, Inspector General, in former Chief Rick Brazil from Sacramento Police Department. Retired, and he operated in that capacity for 3 years plus. In August of 2018, we're all well aware of what happened, or at least many of us are well aware of what transpired. And and I have stated this publicly, I disagreed with the decision, but the sheriff did lock the IG out of sheriff's facilities, essentially making it impossible for the Inspector General to do his, at the time, work. We have gone over that at length in these chambers in it was a very divisive atmosphere, and I say unfortunate, for the community. In December of 2018, the board adopted a new scope of work, which I will say that I largely crafted that scope of work, which was, it had a great deal less ambiguity, and in my opinion had more teeth behind it, and gave the Inspector General more autonomy in an effort to avoid that unfortunate situation from ever happening again. At the same time, the board gave direction at the request and suggestion of Supervisor Cerna that we further solidify and try to put into place policies and procedures that will prevent a lockout from happening in the future. And that was done in the form of an MOU. The board gave direction for Supervisor Cerna and myself to work on it, and me being board chair, to then take whatever product there was to the sheriff and negotiate to the degree that negotiations were necessary, because it is an agreement between the board and the sheriff. It is not an agreement that the OIG is a party to. I want to thank Supervisor Cerna, who largely did the work of crafting that document, and it was done in a way that was, I think, fair, but gave it substance and the necessary powers that we need to avoid that unfortunate situation from happening again. I did take what was primarily Supervisor Cerna's language, and I took it to the sheriff to negotiate an agreement between the sheriff and the Board of Supervisors. It was changed very, very little. The document that you see today, there's a red line document in the back of the room that is available to the public, is the draft MOU. I believe it accomplishes what it is that Supervisor Cerna and myself were enlisted to do, and I think it will help us moving forward in the future. With that, there is one correction to the line-out version that I'd like County Council to address.
Sure. It's section 4, and it's on page 2 of the red line copy. Instead of it being underlined, the words "and that failure to do so constitutes a potential violation of Sacramento County Charter Section 5, that should be a strikeout version. That language was in the original but is not in the final.
I'll explain that change. I personally wanted it to stay in there. However, after talking with former county council, it was stated to me that it's not even necessary, that this can accomplish everything we want to accomplish without having that line in there. And so I took it upon to agree to the strikeout. If it was not going to make any difference in the outcome of if this document should ever be necessary, then I agreed to the strikeout. Do you agree with the characterization that it's not necessary, Council?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. So then what happens is we went out and we actually did an RFP to solicit candidates which was done how it was done the first time, or in 2015. But they also ended up having to utilize a consulting firm to actually recruit. We did get one response to the RFP. We held interviews. This is back in June, and it was determined that it was not a right fit. The one candidate that we had was for a variety of reasons, as respected as they are, it was not a right fit for this community, was the feeling. And so we then went back to the drawing board. The drawing board this time being, I don't want to do another RFP where we get one solicitation. Now let's face it, and I'm just going to be blunt here, not an easy job to fill after everything that's been in the newspaper. I read that, don't know if I'm turning my resume in. So it's been difficult. We did get the services of a consultant, a recruitment consultant, who was able to identify a number of people through various channels, including going out to ethnic law enforcement organizations, which was important to me, and to and largely what you're going to get is retired law enforcement to apply for a position like this, who has that kind of experience. We were able to identify, we went through the resumes, we were able to identify 3 candidates that I felt, 4 were brought forward. 1 I disqualified because of past knowledge, frankly. The third, so we landed on 3 to interview. 1 dropped out, which is not uncommon in these practices. So we interviewed 2. These were not firms. Sometimes they were firms, sometimes they were individuals. These were individuals. We held those interviews yesterday morning, and it was agreed upon by the sheriff, myself, and with the concurrence, because this is in the collective bargaining agreements, that we have the concurrence of the LEMA, the Law Enforcement Management Association, and the Department and the Deputy Sheriff's Association. They didn't have a vote, but they were there in the process to provide comments. As I said, that is in the collective bargaining agreements with the unions. Now let's go to the timing of this thing. I've been criticized for going too fast. I've also been criticized for going too slow. In the same paper, by the way. Which is fine. It's a difficult process. But I believed yesterday, or I should say 2 weeks ago, when we looked at the calendar and figured out how this would go, that sooner was better than later, because of over a year has gone by when we don't have an IG in place. And I think that's not good for the community. I don't think that's good for our oversight role as a Board of Supervisors. So I did ask that it be placed on the agenda today. I made a mistake, and I apologize to the community if that was, if it seemed that I was rushing. I didn't feel like a year later I was rushing, but I can certainly see the perception of that. And so at the end of this, after the end of public discussion and board discussion, I will be asking that the board not take action today, and that instead we hear the item. We go over the documents and any questions people might have. By the way, also available is the resume for the gentleman, which I will go over in a moment, who was recommended to go forward. So the resume is in the back of the room and available online with all of our other public documents. The gentleman that was successful in the interview process, I will say, from yesterday, is a gentleman that has been in law enforcement his entire career, except for a brief stint in the military. And he served most of his career in Seattle, very diverse, very large community. He was, from 1985 to 92, a police officer, being a patrol officer. He was a sergeant from 1992 to 1995, where he worked on community policing and, most importantly, internal affairs investigations. He was a lieutenant in Seattle Police Department from 1995 to 2001, in which, among other things, he worked with the Violence Against Women Act, developed a regional training curriculum to improve domestic violence investigations. He was a captain and precinct commander from 2001 to 2002 for a year. He was a captain, and this was particularly important to me, in internal affairs from 2002 to 2004, having direct oversight over investigations into, among other things, police misconduct. And I can tell you from the interview process, he came off as somebody who was straightforward, honest, and not going to be a pushover to anybody. He was then a captain in the training section at Seattle before he became the Brentwood Police Department Chief of Police from 2006 to 2017, when he retired and came to Sacramento, where he is a resident because his family lives here, and decided that he had retired a little too early and wanted to give back to the community, and found this to be a good opportunity. So that's my long diatribe and lead up into this. Mr. Devine is here if there's any specific personnel questions. He's prepared to answer those. Otherwise, I will first give the board an opportunity to ask any questions you might have. And I will start, just if Mr. Natoli would indulge me, because it's just easier, with Supervisor Cerna.
Sure, it's fine.
I will keep the public hearing open. Yes, sir. Supervisor Natoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I too want to first thank you certainly for your efforts and leadership as board chair. Obviously, it's a task that coming off of where we were nearly a year ago with some of the hearings and the testimony, and certainly I think the serious concerns that were brought to this board. These chambers were full, and I think out of that, obviously, the hearing that we had nearly a year ago now, on December 4th last year, where direction was given as embodied in your report and that in the staff report for you and Supervisor Cerna to work on the MOU, but also recognizing you were the incoming chair, we're going to be tasked with assuming we could work through the memorandum of understanding, also then the recruitment of and the recommendation we brought forward as it related to filling the Inspector General seat. I will just say too that, and I said this at the hearings last year, and it's been a concern of mine over the past several months, is that the longer that the position sits vacant, I think, then I think the more potential there is for concerns to build regarding a particular incident, a particular critical situation, conditions that will be under the purview of the Inspector General to review and respond to. And I just, again, appreciate the fact that, as you explained, in not trying to rush things, but also to try to be diligent and deliberate about getting to certainly a recommendation for the MOU, but also as it relates to the candidate selection, that you were doing your best to try to balance those two things. So I thank you, Patrick, for your work on this. I would just note too that I think it's been certainly cleared up in the question that Supervisor Cerna put forward in your response to Mr. Chair, that the information, recognizing that there was a work in progress, certainly on the candidate selection and recommendation until as recently as just 24 hours ago, and that the MOU and the strikeout version were only made available, within the last day or so. So I think it's important, as it was stated here, that for those that are here in the audience, we have some written comments, and we'll probably hear from some folks in the audience, that over the course of the Thanksgiving holiday and leading up to, I assume it's going to come over to December 10th, we'll give about 3 weeks for folks to weigh in on both aspects of this, but we're going to have a public hearing. So I don't know if you intend to have any discussion at the board level today, because I think one of the things that was that's embodied in here is this whole notion of dispute resolution, that in the event that a circumstance were to arrive between the sheriff and the OIG, and certainly this board and its role in oversight, that there is a process that's outlined, and again, I'm not going to go through that in detail, but I think it's important to note, because there would be, I guess, a selection of a mediator, and then there's some deadlines or timelines to actually having responses. And I think that's important, because I think what brought us to some of the tumultuous hearings, and certainly the very passionate and again very I think engaged testimony and commentary and review in the community, was that we'd had the lockout that had occurred, and last summer of 2018, and then all that succeeded from that. So I think it's important that, one, the tasks that are here, but also that that there's the ability to hopefully avoid that in the future. I would say too that I think filling the position is very important. I know there's others who believe that we still should have a community panel and so forth, and I trust we'll hear from folks on that. But that this position, the person that occupies this position, their role, not just in responding, and in reviewing critical incidents, but conditions in our jails, certainly community concerns about aspects of the interaction between our sworn law enforcement officers and certainly our broader community in so many different respects is very important. And I think having a person that will succeed to Mr. Brazil in this case, obviously it's been a year since his contract ended, that we need to act upon that, certainly, and assure the community that this is not only taken seriously by this board, but by this community, and obviously the work that you've done with Sheriff Jones and with our represented bargaining units to bring this today as a culmination of a lot of different aspects of that. So I'll kind of reserve comments relative to the specifics, so we may want to take the public testimony and then come back on the 10th. But I do think there's probably an opportunity to have some further comment, but I'll hold that. But thank you again, and certainly thanks to Sheriff for his participation, and look forward to putting the touches on this that would allow us to go forward with an IG in place to do some very important work on behalf of this board, this community that we represent. So thanks.
Thank you, Supervisor. Okay, I have no other board members punching in, so I will go to public comment and start with Dr. Rita Cepeda.
Good morning. I am thankful about the continuance because we did have problem accessing the documentation. I did get access to the scope of work, so that's what I'm going to comment on today. I believe there may be other folks that speak to the MOU in that it seems awfully lax in some ways vis-a-vis the sheriff. So today you're ready, well, I was going to say today you're ready to approve, but I just realized you're not. And so I'll proceed with the rest of my comments. The language that I did see in the scope of work in some of the MOU does seem to reflect the lessons we've learned from the past. There are some areas where I think that there's a great deal of discomfort that you will hear about. I want to address the issue of the scope of work, and there are 4 specific points that I want to make regarding that document. And taken from the document as follows. It says, the Office of the Inspector General is created to, and then several issues, but the first one I want to note is to ensure the integrity of the citizens' complaint process and the thoroughness and fairness of related Sheriff Department investigations while fostering positive relations with the community. The second point, prepare and present an annual report to the Board of Supervisors, which includes statistical information, analyses of trends, identification of pervasive and emerging problems, and recommendations for improvement. Third, serve as community and complainant liaison and information conduit for residents of the county. And then the fourth, meet with community in various forums. I gravitated to those 4 areas because we've talked a great deal to this board about the stress and lack of support in those areas in the past. So these portions of the scope of work go to the heart of many of the presentations we have made to this body, focusing on the most significant problems we have faced vis-a-vis the Sheriff's Office, including fairness of investigation, integrity of the data, our inability to get accurate information even after filing Freedom of Information Act request, and the near absence of any interaction between county residents and the Sheriff's Office. We urge you not to forget the past and to remember that on December 4th, 2018, this body heard directly from Sheriff Jones after his lockout of County Inspector General Rick Brazil. The sheriff said to you that while he supported such a position, he wanted this body, he warned actually, this body not to go too far in trying to provide oversight of an independently elected official. In fact, the sheriff said, and I quote, "I've been described as a rogue, authoritarian, a dictator, a mini Trump, all because I won't allow independent oversight of the Sheriff's Department. This seems strange to me," he said. "No other Sheriff's Department in the state has oversight that is being contemplated here." And that, of course, is an inaccurate statement. In fact, in several counties throughout the state have oversight. The outcome has already proven positive, and the law enforcement work of their officers has not been hampered. In fact, the largest county in California, Los Angeles, has established a Sheriff's Civilian Oversight Commission. Their motto is, quote, "working for transparency and accountability with respect to the Sheriff's Department." We urge you, therefore, to take the steps necessary to ensure the success of the new Inspector General. So on behalf of Step Up Sacramento and the Sacramento Immigration Coalition, we stand ready to work with the new Inspector General in an advisory capacity and to provide significant information in most, if not all, of the specifics included in the scope of work. You have access to all of our contact information. We are grateful for the continuance you've discussed today, and let's begin the process of mending this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thanks, Dr. Rios.
Liz Blum. Welcome, Liz.
Liz.
Hello, my name is Liz. I'm an organizer with Decarcerate Sacramento. We are here because we want true community oversight, because we want a process of choosing an inspector general that reflects the purpose of having an inspector general, to hold our sheriff's department accountable. According to the California Department of Justice, since 1980, 655 in-custody deaths, including in corrections, have happened. On average, 26 people per year die in the hands of the Sheriff's Department in Sacramento. In Seattle, Mark Evanson oversaw the day-to-day function of the Office of Professional Accountability, much like our own Sacramento Police Department OPA. Reports say that they felt muzzled and unable to do their job to report on use of force or fatal incidents. More than once, officers involved in complaints were officially exonerated with little to no investigation. How can we expect a culture of accountability if you are not accountable in your process of choosing a candidate and to the process of creating an MOU that truly holds Scott Jones accountable? How can we feel that our community's voice is going to be heard when the person who needs to be held accountable gets to choose his own boss? When we do not get to know what the other options were, when we have less than 24 hours to respond to a decision being made behind closed doors. Supervisor Kennedy, you have mentioned your alleged intention to create a citizen oversight committee to provide independent community involvement when looking into activities of the Sheriff's Department. We need you to align your words with actions. This is not oversight. This is not accountability. This is not what we elected you all to do.
Thank you, Liz. Courtney Hanson.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Courtney with Decarcerate Sacramento as well. I'm happy the continuation is happening and sincerely thank you for the apology. I do find it really concerning that we only learned Mark Evanson's name 24 hours before this meeting, but my understanding is because the Sacramento Bee was inquiring about that information, and otherwise I'm not sure what would have happened. This saga has gone on for a year, which we know is frustrating for many people, but this saga began because we need more transparency and public accountability for our sheriff. So a sense of urgency now, when applicants had their last interviews yesterday morning, feels like a disservice to democracy and the hundreds of people who have packed this room in the past. And we know how hard it is for people to pack this room and take time off work and be here. And it's a disservice to people like Michael McIntyre, who was gunned down by sheriff's deputies with 27 shots because they said he threw rocks at them. It's concerning that you don't imagine the outcome changing, Supervisor Kennedy, with more time and public input. At one point you were discussing, a few years ago, a citizen oversight committee, and now you can't imagine Sacramento residents weighing in with valuable perspectives. The Memorandum of Understanding does raise serious concerns, perhaps even more than the particular individual occupying this seat. And I apologize, I feel like it is hard to weigh in on after such short amount of time, but it feels like we're putting the IG on a leash. We didn't have an oversight issue with our IG, we had it with the sheriff. And it looks like the sheriff, if he decides not to provide information, he just needs to simply explain why. And I'm not sure what could happen after that. Could that be appealed? Because what we learned last year is that the sheriff's ideas about what is reasonable are not always the same as the community he's supposed to be serving. And if the sheriff can decide that it's appropriate to restrict IG access, I want to know with this MOU, what would have happened differently when Brazil was locked out? Like literally thinking about how that situation would have unfolded differently with this MOU and if we're really changing things to the extent that we need to. Thank you.
Thank you, and just so everybody's aware, I will be addressing specific areas that were directed at me after the public comment. Mackenzie Wilson. Thank you for your impeccable handwriting, Mackenzie.
Thank you. So I gave you guys all today, I'm Mackenzie, I'm with Decarcerate, a document. It talks about toxicity within institutions and organizations, and it's a profound document, and so I'm hoping that you do actually take the time to really read it, because it will possibly change a way that we do things, period as people, but also like how you guys can start to change the ways that decisions are made in this space when it comes to us and our ability to weigh in on and tell you actually, because we're the experts, right? Well, these are the things that are actually happening to us, not the consultants that we bring in the room. One is like the one that I want to pay attention to is the idea of sense of urgency. What it means is that we have this continued sense of urgency that makes it difficult to take time to be inclusive. It doesn't encourage democratic or thoughtful decision making, to think long term and to consider consequences. It frequently results in sacrificing potential allies for quick or highly visible results. For example, sacrificing interests of community of color or impacted people to win victories for the default or norm community, which is white people, right? Like for folks like us. It's just, what we need to be doing is coming up with realistic work plans, and that includes how to prioritize impacted voices, which would include like, how do we make more access points? I think we dropped the ball last time when we didn't make evening meetings. I don't know why that didn't happen. Is it because we didn't stay or something? I'm just not sure why that didn't happen. And I want to suggest.
You asked about what kind of. I didn't hear.
Why we didn't make the evening meetings.
Oh, make the evening meetings. Okay.
Available, and so the simple things like even making the parking free, things like that. So I'm almost finished. So realistic work plans, leadership which understands that things.
Mackenzie, we went 3 hours talking about one subject. This is extremely important. I'm not cutting you off.
I know. Thank you.
I'm not going to cut you off.
Thank you.
So don't feel like you have to rush.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. No sense of urgency.
Yeah.
I didn't say that.
Thank you, guys. And so leadership which understands that things take longer because anyone expects it does take longer than anyone expects. We want to discuss and plan for what it means to set goals of inclusivity and diversity, particularly in terms of time. We have to learn from past experience how long things take. I mean, we just learned, right, when people do want to talk about things, so we should maybe think that just people would always want to talk, right? And if we made it accessible for people to always want to talk about these things, don't you think they might be here? So we want to learn from past experience how long things take, write realistic proposals with realistic timeframes. We want to be clear about how we will make good decisions in an atmosphere of urgency, because we have been doing this for a year, right? We have needed oversight. It is a disservice to Michael and his family that this is something that, you know what I mean? But that we do need to make great decisions. I applaud that we're going to take the time, and I hope that we continue to take time, and to make sure impacted voices are in the room. But like I said, I think we need to revisit these other alternatives. Like I said, those evening meetings should come back. We should talk about making parking free, things like that. And of course, we're going to keep coming back because, we want to participate in these systems and in these decisions that are made, and how they get made, because we want to be able to bring the people who are impacted into this space to tell you what they need. They're the experts, they know. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last public comment card I have. I will ask Supervisor Cerna if he has any questions or comments. Thank you very much. Supervisor Natoli.
Yes, just a couple of quick items. Again, I too appreciate the comments here. The scope of work, and I think one of the words is not just a word. I think it's what comes behind it. And I think the ability to independently review and to provide certainly to the community, but working through the process that will ultimately be established under the MOU and certainly under the scope of services. I just think that independent, and it's right in the first line of the attachment 1, which was for the scope of work, and that is, in the capacity of Inspector General, shall independently review departmental policy and procedure, conduct audits of investigatory practices and other audits or inquiries, and may investigate any other matter, excluding personnel-related matters, as requested by the county executive or a majority of the Board of Supervisors. And I wanted to, in reading that out loud, to ask that I trusted that if there are citizen complaints, that this IG will have that ability. I know that was the function from the get-go with Mr. Dean, succeeded obviously by Mr. Brazil, that there's a conduit for the IG to receive complaints, concerns from anyone in the public, whoever they might be, and
that is an affirmative, no change to that.
Okay, and so there will be, it's not only the intent, but we will then have a phone number, we'll have email access.
Same protocol that's been in place, phone number, access, a private place to meet, whatever the Inspector General needs to hear the complaints.
Okay.
So no change for that.
And I think now, again, because I know as we've talked about, some of the work that's been done since we, last left this a year ago, but I think not to lose that in the process, because again, they had that independent review, the fact that this came out of discussions in the community, more than a dozen years ago, as it related to concerns in the field and obviously critical incidents, obviously conditions in the jail. And so I think to ensure certainly the integrity of that process as it's embodied in this scope of services, I want to make sure we highlight that. And I don't think it'd be a bad idea that we may have additional audience members here that we can do a little summary of that when we come back on December 10th, so that it's clear beyond obviously the person who's being recommended, but the scope of services and the MOU, which has been a focus obviously of our subcommittee of this board and certainly of the work that the sheriff and the chair have brought to us today. I just think going back, maybe just a quick revisitation of that. It's in the attached materials, people can read it, but I think it's important to emphasize because that was a significant focus over the years that this did function in the people that function in this capacity, but also I think what we're asking of this person going forward in addition to what's embodied in the MOU. So I wanted to point that out. I think it's very, very important. Thanks.
Okay, I'll address a few things. First of all, regarding the scope of work, the scope of services language, when I said it was stronger with more teeth, it is compared to what it was. Is it perfect? It didn't go far enough in my mind, but it is much stronger than it was, particularly as Supervisor Natoli has pointed out, in the investigatory powers. It was fought by some to even have the word investigation in there, and it's in there many times. So that is important. I think the stronger language in the scope of services, coupled with the MOU, which the purpose of the MOU is to actually have the mediation in there so that sheriff can't just lock it down. We have to go to a third party and mediate. It also, if you'll recall, we throughout the documents that we adopted did retain the authority of the board for subpoena power. So should we ever get to that, we do retain that authority. We are in a better place than I think we were in the past. Is it far enough? Not in my mind, and I think I've been on record saying that, but I was unsuccessful last time, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try again. And I will be working with members of this audience. I will be working with many outside of this room to see how we can truly come. Right now we have something called and I've been outspoken on this is not news to anybody, the Sheriff's Oversight Community Advisory Board as being a public relations arm of the Sheriff's Department, which is fine. That's okay. But let's not kid ourselves and think that it's oversight, because it's not. It hasn't operated that way. And how do we get there? I don't know, but I'm going to be talking with members of the community to see if we can get there. Regarding evening meetings, I won't bring it up because it's not on the agenda, so I can't, but I'd be glad to meet with anybody who wants to talk about it after this meeting.
Supervisor Kennedy?
Yes.
Can I just make one clarifying comment? A lot of discussion last fall about changing scope of service. I just want to spend a couple minutes, just get a little bit of history, so know why we ended up and why we believe scope of service has more teeth than it did prior.
Sure.
When this first came in, Supervisor Natoli remembers, it was about incidents in jail. And that's what we hired an inspector general, was to get citizens' complaints and investigate deaths and issues in the jail. When the budget cuts came in the early 2010s, the district attorney for a period of time did not do any officer-involved shooting work. And I think Supervisor Cerna was chair at that point. When those issues started coming up, we did not have a go-to person. And we ended up giving that work to the inspector general at that point. And that evolved into officer-involved shooting. But if you went back to our original scope of service, it did not even have specific language on how that will be done. So the work we did last fall brings in the officer-involved shooting and stipulates how that's going to happen, because there was confusion about when can reports go out. Is it a DA first? Is it the OIG? So a lot of the stuff that we needed on that one particular component, total clarity between the board, the county exec, and OIG on how that will be conducted. That was one of the big things we wanted to change, is not have the ambiguity and folks point to it, say, nowhere does it allow you to do X, Y, Z. Set out the expectations, sets out how the reports will be done, who will review it, and again, I think the board has made the point, stresses the point about independent. So that was a very much feature that we needed, that it wasn't one of those things, I'm not saying this was happening, but it wasn't that OIG did a report, then it went to the sheriff. OIG does a report, it comes to the public and to the board. So those were some of the big components we were seeking to change, that we did make those changes.
Thank you.
I just want to clarify that issue.
Thank you. Is there any other comments of the board? We will be hearing this item, and we will keep public testimony open. Supervisor Cerna, are you okay? Okay. Then with that, we are going to recess till the afternoon session.
We need a motion to continue, Mr. Chair.
What?
Do we need a
Oh,
motion?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
motion to
yes.
continue.
I'll move to continue, and I believe Supervisor Cerna seconded. Did I hear that? Okay. Okay. Roll call vote, please.
And we are continuing this item to December 10th at 10:45.
Yes.
Supervisor Frost? Aye. Natoli?
Aye.
Cerna? Kennedy?
Aye.
Mr.
Unanimous.
Chair, just before that, though, you said at 10:45. I mean, again, today, obviously, it was no one could have anticipated we'd be hearing it at 12:30. So I'm just wondering, is that, again, I leave it to the chair and the clerk to work on this, but that may be that.
Afternoon?
I was thinking maybe the afternoon might be.
If you just give us flexibility, 12:10, there's certain other items that we need to see if they were noticed or not, and we will get the timeout.
Okay.
We won't do 10:45, but we'll figure out in the afternoon if that can go at
But I
that.
just think in fairness to everybody, not just this item, but.
I would
you know,
prefer the afternoon.
Yeah, afternoon.
Understood. I know the direction you want.
Got it, okay.
So December 10th, no time, no specific
No
time.
time, yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
We're good.
Okay.
So,
Unanimous vote was.
So with that, we will go to recess. Supervisor Cerna, we will be coming back at 2 o'clock. Go take a nap. Okay.
You can join us for recess if you want.
Patrick, we have one quick closed session.
Oh, that's right. Labor.